Good afternoon. Welcome to the August 24th, 2021 policy session of the Phoenix City Council. I will call the meeting to order and ask that the clerk call the roll.
Councilwoman Ansari.
Here.
Councilman DeCiccio. Councilwoman Guardado.
Here.
Councilwoman O'Brien.
Here.
Councilwoman Pastor. Councilwoman Stark.
Here.
Councilman Waring. Vice Mayor Garcia.
Here.
Mayor Gallego.
We have an interpreter here to provide Spanish translation. Mario, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Hello, my name is Mario Barajas, and together with my colleague Elsie Duarte, we will be serving as Spanish interpreters for today's policy session. I will now take a moment to introduce ourselves to our Spanish-speaking audience. Hola, buenas tardes. Bienvenidos a la reunión del Consejo de Política. Mi nombre es Mario Barajas y junto con mi colega Elsie Duarte estaremos sirviéndoles hoy como intérpretes a los de habla hispana. Deseamos pedirles de antemano, si es que van a dar un comentario público, por favor, hable despacio, con claridad y evite tener distracciones de fondo. Finalmente, pause después de cada una o dos oraciones para que podamos interpretar lo que esté diciendo de la manera más completa posible. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mario, and we will work to adjust volume levels. Today's council meeting will include significant discussion and input from the public. We will likely take a break midway through the meeting if a good break period allows around 3 p.m. Vice Mayor, do we have a call for executive session?
Yes, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion for the City Council to meet in executive session pursuant to Arizona Revised Statutes, Section 38-431.03a on Wednesday, August 25th, 2021 at 12:15 p.m. at Phoenix City Hall, 200 West Washington Street, Phoenix, Arizona, in an online meeting.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may.
We will now go. Yes.
If I may check if Councilman Waring is on the line.
I am on the line. I apologize. My WebEx didn't work, so I'm actually on the phone. So my apologies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will now go to agenda item number 1. Public safety is our highest priority at the City of Phoenix and is one of my highest priorities. When community members find themselves in trouble or the victims of crime, we have a responsibility to help. Over the course of 2 days recently, Phoenix police responded to 12,000 calls. Let that sink in for a moment. 12,000 calls for help in just 2 days. In a moment, you will hear from City Manager Ed Zerker about the Ballard Spar investigation and 2 areas where we have most definitely failed: the Phoenix Police Department's role in the gang charges of October 2020 and the challenge coin that circulated that promoted hate and mockery. I fully support the City Manager and Police Chief's decisions to impose disciplinary action and require significant policy change at the Phoenix Police Department. These are not mutually exclusive ideas. We can promote a safe city and have constitutional policing. We must promote and protect the public. We can do both. With that, I will turn it over to our City Manager, Ed Zerker.
Thank you, Mayor. Nearly 3 weeks ago, I released 2 investigations that I requested from the Philadelphia team of the Ballard Spar law firm. These investigations are available publicly on Phoenix.gov/newsroom. Item 1A on the agenda today reviews the gang-related charges brought against protesters by Maricopa County Attorney's Office with the collaboration of some Phoenix Police Department employees. Item 1B on the agenda reviews the creation and distribution of a challenge coin showing disrespectful images and political speech related to a protest in 2017. Both of these incidents represent very public failures of the Phoenix Police Department. They show disturbing actions by some of our employees and larger policy gaps and process failures that must be fixed. You have my commitment and the commitment of Chief Williams that they will be fixed. And I know that our police officers share that view. As a legal matter, both incidents are also the subject of claims and litigation against the Phoenix Police Department, the City of Phoenix, and individual city employees. These legal proceedings complicate a bit our discussion publicly, although we are committed to a full airing of what we have learned and what we need to do. For that context, I've asked City Attorney Chris Meyer to briefly discuss how the legal status of these two incidents plays into today's discussion. Mr. Meyer?
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Mayor, members of the council, as the City Manager mentioned, the events that are the subject of both of these investigations, the August 2017 protest and the related challenge coin, as well as the October 17th protest and the gang charges that were filed, are both still the subject of ongoing investigations, multiple investigations, and pending litigation. Therefore, staff will not be able to comment on matters that are subject to the ongoing investigation or litigation. Commenting on those matters in public can affect the investigations, the outcome of the investigations, and also can violate the rights of the defendants in the litigation or those under investigation.
We are certain, thank you, Chris. We're certain that that's a rather narrow scope of questions, so we anticipate a robust discussion today about these reports and the follow-up. So, as I mentioned, in February, I became aware of the separate issues of gang charges for protesters and challenge coins, and I asked the city attorney to retain the law firm of Ballard Spahr to investigate and provide public reports of what happened. I was aware of Ballard Spahr because they had issued a review in January 2021 of the Philadelphia Police Department and their handling of protests that occurred in 2020 in Philadelphia, and did a thorough and credible job. I believe the Ballard Spahr reports for us provide a clear assessment of what happened and helped illuminate what next steps we must take. We thought it was important for you to hear directly from the investigators and ask any of them questions you may have. So with that in mind, I will now introduce the lead attorney from the Ballard Spahr team, Mr. Hank Hockheimer. And after his presentation, I will give a brief report on follow-up, and then we will go to discussion. At this point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Hockheimer and his team.
Thank you, Mr. Zerker. Can you all hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Okay. All right. As Mr. Zerker mentioned, my name is Hank Hockheimer. I'm an attorney with Ballard Spahr. I'm based in Philadelphia. I want to take a moment to introduce the team that worked on this. We have Brad Gershell, who's in one of the boxes. He's based in New York. Jillian Andrews of our firm is based in Phoenix, and Terry Grugan, or Terrence Grugan, and myself are based out of Philadelphia. All are members of Ballard Spahr's White Collar and Government Investigations team. I'm the practice group leader of that team, and we conduct investigations around the country for companies and public entities on a variety of issues. And as Mr. Zerker alluded to, this past year we were hired by the Controller for the City of Philadelphia to conduct an investigation into the city's response to protests that occurred following the murder of George Floyd. That investigation reviewed multiple agencies within Philadelphia, but prominently the police department. And the result of that investigation, again, as Mr. Zerker alluded to, was the issuance of a report that also contained numerous recommendations. Many of those recommendations have been implemented already by the Philadelphia Police Department, and others are in the process of being implemented. So we thank Mr. Zerker for giving us the opportunity, and we thank Mayor Gallego, Vice Mayor Garcia, and all council members for the opportunity to discuss both of our reports today in this council session. So I believe we have a PowerPoint that will make its way on the screen. And we can go to the next page, please. So as Mr. Zerker said, we were retained by the city to conduct an independent inquiry into the Phoenix Police Department's role in the Maricopa County Attorney's Office decision to prosecute protesters for assisting a criminal street gang. Just to sort of reset things for all of you, on October 17th of 2020, there was a protest in downtown Phoenix. About an hour into that protest, the police declared an unlawful assembly, which gave them the right to arrest protesters at that point. Several protesters were arrested for charges ranging from obstruction of a public thoroughfare to conspiracy to assault police officers. And again, that was on October 17th. 10 days later, before a Maricopa County grand jury, the criminal gang charges were presented, and ultimately an indictment was issued under the criminal gang statute against several protesters. And that's what we were hired to come in and look at the collaboration, if any, from the City of Phoenix Police Department in connection with those charges. Next slide, please. So in particular, the scope of our investigation was essentially threefold. One, did the Phoenix Police Department collaborate with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office in bringing the criminal street gang charges to the police department and the MCAO, and included consultation with other law enforcement agencies as well, including the FBI and the Gilbert Police Department. This collaboration to file charges against this group called ACAB, and that pointedly omitted the Phoenix Police Department's Gang Enforcement Unit, GEU, in an apparent violation of policy. And just we'll talk more about the GEU a little bit down the road in the presentation, but it's a specialized unit within the Phoenix Police Department that has experience in identifying criminal street gangs, and also is familiar with and has experience with the policies and procedures and protocols that have to be used in order to designate a organization or group as a criminal street gang and file charges under the criminal street gang statute. Next slide, please. ACAB is a slogan, not a cohesive or recognized group. Some protesters chanted during this protest, "All cops are bastards," and that is ACAB is the acronym for that. Some protesters had tattoos symbolizing ACAB, but it's not a formal, cohesive or recognized group. Next slide, please. Further in our findings, we found, and again, just to back up, we interviewed lots of police officers. We reviewed thousands of documents to come up with these findings. And in this finding in particular, we say that as the police and prosecutors built the criminal street gang case, we found through the interviews of several witnesses that the Gang Enforcement Unit was intentionally excluded in order to, as one police officer told us during an interview, to, quote, keep things quiet. We found that the GEU was affirmatively siloed and sidelined from any significant role in the bringing of these charges against these protesters. We also found that the police department ignored expert established criteria for identifying a true criminal street gang, and also ignored established protocols for processing the gang classification. Ultimately, there was no credible evidence to substantiate the classification of this ACAB group of people as a formal group or gang in the context of a criminal street gang, or that the protesters at issue who were charged under the criminal street gang statute would resort to violence. Next slide, please. During the course of our investigation, we also became aware that in April of 2021, at the request of Chief Williams, the Phoenix Police Department Special Investigation Detail started an investigation into possible perjury committed by a Phoenix Police Department sergeant for his grand jury testimony. That testimony was on October 27th of 2020, and that led to the charges under the criminal street gang statute. As we reviewed what SID did, we determined that they ended their investigation roughly a month after it started. The SID investigation found insufficient evidence to proceed with their review. They also acknowledged that their investigation methodology was unorthodox. We certainly agree with that characterization. We think it was both unorthodox, and we found that it was also flawed in that the sergeant who presented this matter before the Maricopa County grand jury that led to the charges under the street gang statute, that sergeant was never interviewed by the SID investigators, and there was no attempt to speak with anyone from the Maricopa County Attorney's Office either. Next slide. So we'll talk briefly about our recommendations, all of which are contained in the report. The first was that we recommend that a separate law enforcement agency be retained to conduct a thorough investigation, review the investigative steps taken by SID, and acknowledge that they were limited, and that since more information is now available, an independent agency, law enforcement agency, should come in and review this. I mean, just a note about that. We, like I said in the beginning, we do these investigations all over the country, but we are hampered by a few things. One, we don't have subpoena power. We can't compel witnesses to speak with us. We can't compel witnesses or organizations to produce documents to us. However, a separate law enforcement agency does have subpoena power and does have the power to compel witness testimony and the production of documents. We also recommend that the police department revise their investigative guidelines to inform the use of the criminal street gang statute, and that they should really set forth clearly in writing what it expects from officers and investigators who engage in gang-related investigations, and really reaffirm the dominance of the GEU and their role in gang charges, that they really should be the point people within the department to investigate and ultimately decide whether charges under the criminal street gang statute are warranted. We issue a recommendation that the police department's policy for information gathering and analysis in connection with criminal street gang charges should be bolstered and set forth more clearly in writing.
Thank you, Hank.
Yep.
Just to follow up on that, and then we'll return for council questions of Hank and his team or anybody in the city side. We just want to go over the response to these recommendations very quickly. First, employee conduct has to be addressed clearly. It's important to note, as Hank mentioned, Ballard SPAR did not have authority to recommend or institute specific discipline or to criminally review any city employee. That was not the scope of their engagement. Rather, they were to define areas the city should follow up for further investigation. The potential to deprive people of liberty because of First Amendment protest is very serious, and even more serious is if criminal conduct occurred in determining charges, writing reports, or testifying before a grand jury. Therefore, I asked for an external review as recommended by Ballard SPAR. I first started with the Arizona Attorney General's Office, who declined jurisdiction. We asked the Yavapai County Attorney's Office, who was interested, but she had a conflict that she could not clear. We talked to the Coconino County Attorney's Office. Coconino, as a smaller office, just simply did not have the investigative resources necessary to assist us. We asked the Department of Public Safety, who declined, and, as has been noted recently, asked the Tucson Police Department. Initially, in my conversations with the Tucson City Manager, he agreed that they could take the engagement, but as they have dug into it a little more, he has since clarified with me that Tucson Police needs to review what the scope of the engagement would be to ensure that Tucson Police has sufficient resources to commit to this and still service their community. So we'll continue to work to answer the Tucson Police Department questions, and I am hopeful that Tucson will be able to take this on, but they still have some work to do before they can make a definitive answer to that question. Finally, we have administrative investigations that are underway. It's important to note that our employees do have due process rights which will have to be followed and should be followed. The Professional Standards Bureau, the City Attorney's Office, and Human Resources together will conduct the administrative reviews. And also, just as noted publicly, I have also issued discipline to Chief Williams for her role in this matter. Chief Williams has taken some steps, recognizing the problems as outlined in the report of a meeting with leadership where no one stepped into the breach to object to this bad idea and to stop the bad idea or to communicate about the bad idea. She has reorganized her executive staff, her assistant chiefs, and replaced and rotated some folks around inside her executive leadership team. Also, the tactical response unit personnel who are named in this report, she has said will no longer serve in the tactical response unit, which is an assignment in the police department. It is not a right of employment. Next, there were serious breaches of public trust that must never happen again. So Chief Williams has begun a policy review process. In some cases, there may have been policies that didn't exist. More often, there are policies that needed to be strengthened in the following areas. First and foremost is a protection of First Amendment rights of protesters, even when, and particularly when, protesters are expressing views that may be opposed to the police department. And in all cases, we have an obligation to protect First Amendment rights. Also to strengthen, as Hank mentioned, the investigation protocols for gang determination of gang affiliation and gang charging. Also to ensure appropriate oversight of coordination with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office on criminal charges for protesters. There was clearly an over-reliance, over-dependence by the police department on MCAO, and maybe vice versa, that we need to address to maintain appropriate professional separation of the police and the prosecutors. And also, and very importantly, we need a review of our special investigation detail. As Mr. Hockheimer noted, there were serious flaws in how they began to conduct their investigation, which is why we have taken it to an outside agency. One of the most disturbing parts of the report was a failure to properly vet the ideas to Maricopa County attorneys, of the Maricopa County Attorney's Office and individual Phoenix police officers. And so proper notification and assessment was missed, and therefore the chief is establishing clear protocols to elevate significant issues to her without an option to delegate in areas such as whenever there's a recommendation to deviate from department policy or operations orders, it must come directly to the chief. If in issues of significant employee conduct, must come directly to the chief. And interests of significant community-wide concern must come directly to the chief. Another problem was the difficulties noted by Ballard Spahr in sometimes getting timely information from the Phoenix Police Department. So therefore, in the records and follow-up records area, those delays mean that the law department and the chief have begun an administrative investigation of the issues that Ballard Spahr encountered to ensure that we have removed those obstacles in the future. Finally, this entire report raised issues about how the Downtown Operations Unit and the Tactical Response Unit are structured to effectively respond to extensive periods of protests. The Downtown Operations Unit bears the biggest brunt of this because many of our protests occur downtown, and the Tactical Response Unit is that unit designated to respond to protests as well. So we need an effective TRU that's organized for success. So we have additionally charged our contracted external review team of 21 CP Solutions, which the mayor and council appointed in March. We have asked them, in addition to their original task, to review the protest tactics and also our training modules. We've asked them to do a further review of how to better organize the DOU and the TRU so that they can be organized to be successful and to ensure the respectful treatment of protesters. Mayor, members of the council, with that, Mr. Hockheimer and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have. Mayor?
Thank you so much. Council member questions and comments. Mayor? Is that Councilwoman
Council-
Pastor?
Guardado.
Guardado, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I just had a couple of questions here. And not exactly sure how you be able to answer this. But if our Office of Accountability and Transparency was active and it was up and running, how would they have handled this investigation and given the different investigative power that we have in place? What type of roadblocks would they have hit during this investigation? And if you can give us some examples in terms of what the Office of Accountability and Transparency would be able to investigate and how they would have actually handled this.
Thank you, Councilman Guardado. That's an excellent question, given the council's recent adoption of an Office of Accountability and Transparency and the fact that we're in the middle of recruiting for that. I think it's an important question. What the OAT will provide us will be an alternative within the city, a designated alternative within the city when the Phoenix Police Department can't investigate itself or shouldn't investigate itself. So we would be able to use the Office of Accountability and Transparency to basically do the things that we had Ballard SPAR do, but the advantage that OAT would have would be that they would be city employees, and therefore, in their administrative investigation or administrative review, city employees would be obligated to speak to them as city employees. So OAT would provide us another avenue, an independent internal avenue that would be an option to use if we felt that an external avenue, such as we used with Ballard SPAR, would be less effective.
And just follow up with that, just thinking about the interviews that were held. How many folks declined interviews that should have been interviewed, given the case?
I'll actually ask Mr. Hockheimer to answer that question because his team were the ones who actually did those interviews.
Yeah, so on the Councilmember Guardado, on the protest investigation, this report, we were able to interview most of the people, if not all. The challenge coin, we haven't gotten to that yet. That was a little more of a challenge, so to speak, as far as being able to interview people, and I can give specifics once we talk about that report. But my colleague Brad Gershell is on the line, and he may have a little more specifics on the interview. But I think most of the people we wanted to speak with, we were able to. We tried at one point during the investigation to interview people from the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, and we were declined that overture. But as to the police department, Brad, anything on that?
Yeah, Mr. Hockheimer, thank you. You've got that right. There were no personnel within the department that we sought an interview from who declined ultimately.
I would add also, Councilwoman, one of the challenges, but this would not be something that OAT could overcome, was that when employees no longer work for the city of Phoenix, for example, we had people who were working for us before when the incidents happened but have since retired. They are under no obligation in an administrative review or an external review such as Ballard conducted to talk to us. That would be the same with OAT. So we would have the challenge of interviewing retired or departed employees in either case.
Okay. And then one of my last questions, where are we in the hiring of the director or putting our office in place, given all the challenges and these investigations, and with DOJ also here working with us? Like, where are we in terms of accelerating that process or a timeline on when this office would be active?
Thank you, Councilwoman. The director of the Office of Accountability and Transparency, that process is underway. We have received applications and have closed the application process. Deputy City Manager Spencer is doing some sessions to talk with folks about characteristics, and the interviews will be taking place in September. So our goal is to have that person hired this fall, and depending on whether they're from within the region or whether they have to move to the region, their start date could be anywhere from the fall or January, just depending on whether there's any relocation necessary with that.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much. And I think it is important to note the city of Phoenix has filed litigation against the state of Arizona. In the state budget, they attempted to restrict cities in many ways, including our Office of Accountability and Transparency. The budget is a document to fund government and not to implement these type of public policies. And I'm hopeful, as I think many of my colleagues are, that litigation will be successful in that area. We'll go to Councilwoman Ansari and then the Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. And I have a number of questions regarding a little bit of elaboration about the strengthening of policy and the timeline. So the first one, I think one of the pieces of this that was most concerning to me was the ability to exclude the gang unit from the decision-making here. So can you elaborate a bit on the process or policies that might be put in place to address interagency collaboration to prevent the ability to bypass entities that are meant to be tasked with certain aspects within the department?
Yes, definitely, Councilwoman. That is an important piece of this follow-up, and I'm going to ask Chief Jerry Williams to respond to that question. Chief?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Boss. Councilwoman Ansari, so what we're working through right now is making sure that the gang unit will be consulted in all gang syndicate investigations, and if any street gang charges have to be approved by me when it's run through the First Amendment process. So we're removing the ability of the line level employee to make that kind of independent decision, and it has to come all the way up to my level.
Got it. Okay. And then in regards to the actions to be taken in response, in the report it says, quote, immediate discipline and reorganization of certain police department staff. Administrative investigations have been opened on all staff having a role in the report, and Ed spoke to this. Can someone speak to the timeline of the reorganization and when council will be notified of the results?
Certainly. I think there's two parts to that question I want to address. The first one has to do with disciplinary reviews. Those are very, very tightly controlled by our civil service rules, our memorandums of understanding, and in the case of police officers, the police officer's Bill of Rights. So the due process for those folks is very important and is going to be followed. And it's pretty difficult to always put a specific timeline on that because of the need to follow all the due process steps. But I'll let the chief respond if she has a sense of that timeline. And then the chief also has already undertaken her reorganization, and so she can speak to that as well. Chief?
Thank you, boss. Councilwoman Ansari, let's start with the reorganization first. So
Okay.
three assistant chiefs were reassigned back to commanders, and then I promoted 3 more assistant chiefs to increase communication, increase transparency. Also of note, in the downtown operations and the tactical response unit, a lieutenant, 3 sergeants, and 9 officers have been removed from their assignments, and we're going to have to fill in those processes. So those employees will no longer be part of the downtown operations or the tactical response unit. Because I had a personnel and systems failure, especially at the patrol level to some degree, I now have 2 patrol chiefs as opposed to just 1. I've had very strict and stringent conversations with my new team and new staff about the expectations to absolutely, without fail, keep me informed of things that rise to a significant level of community interest, a significant level of council interest, a significant level of city management interest, and everyone is keenly aware of that. And I could close by saying also that had a very strong discussion and talk with our command team, I believe it was last week, where we're really focusing on getting things right, recovering from our mistakes, and making sure that I am informed of everything that I need to be informed of without fail.
Okay, thank you. And then similarly, when will the results of the CP Solutions review be available?
I'll ask the Assistant City Manager Barton to answer that. He's been supervising that contract. Jeff?
Councilwoman Ansari, members of the council, The original scope of the report was expanded, as Ed mentioned in his opening remarks. We would have had a report from 21 CP Solutions at the end of this month, but with the expanded scope, our expectation is that that report will be due to us in draft format sometime near the end of October.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. And I understand that the PSB investigations conflicted with the timing of these reports that we're reviewing today. Do you think that those investigations pose any delays to this CP Solutions report? And given just the urgency of the situation and the very rightful call from the community that we're seeing for urgent reform, do you see, or have you put a plan in place to avoid any further delays?
Yeah, the PSB investigations are about individual behaviors. The 21 CP solution is about the structure and the organization. So those two should not be in conflict with each other, and one should not delay the other.
Okay. Perfect. That's it for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Vice Mayor Garcia.
Thank you, Mayor. Ed, I'll do some questions to you and then go back to the chief. Have we as the city, or has the city attorney office reached out to help clear the records of those who were wrongfully charged? What's been our role in that? I'll ask that first.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Mayor. I did have a conversation with the city attorney and the city prosecutor about what the legal steps are from that request. So I'm just take a second here. The city prosecutor is here. If you want to ask another question, we'll circle back to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to further that question, it'd be, have we ran an audit to clear the records or of anyone that was wrongfully charged last summer, not just of that particular day? And I think what's important about that is these cases were brought to light because of how egregious they were, because of the community work to bring it to attention to the media, and obviously these investigations. And so I think it is really important for us to make sure that it didn't happen in other instances, and also to make sure that we're doing right by those folks that were wrongfully charged, as we're being told by these reports.
I'll see if the city attorney can respond. Thanks.
Thank you. Mayor, Councilman Garcia, the process to clear the records of those individuals is going to be done through the county because the charges were brought by the county. They were felony charges charged at the county, not the city prosecutor's office. However, the city prosecutor has been in contact with them about that and is going to follow up with them now to find out what the status or what's happening with that. The individuals generally have to make a request, but that can be expedited, and we're checking to see what the status is.
Okay. I think it's first of all, I think it's our responsibility, especially since we've gotten this information, to make sure that all those records are clear. Along with that, and we've had in previous committee meetings conversations about Brady list or do not testify list. Are we taking any steps to put officers on a Brady list, or what steps are we taking as a city to make sure that folks who've already lied on the stand or in different situations are no longer able to do that?
Thank you. Yes, Chief Assistant City Attorney Julie Cree is here. She can answer that question.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So we are looking closely at who should be looked at for the Brady list. As you know, in order to complete that review for the Brady list, we need to complete our internal PSB investigations, and of course any criminal investigations will have to be completed first. So we will definitely be forwarding that list to the prosecutor's office for review upon completion of those reviews.
So no, just to be clear, no officer involved in any of this investigation or that participated last summer is currently on a Brady list?
We have referred some officers, and they are in the process of review with the prosecutor's office.
So we wouldn't know if in the last couple of months or since this happened, if there was officers that were involved in this that have testified or against folks?
Mayor and Council, so we are looking at all available evidence, but for the Brady list process, anybody that is under review also has the right to due process right to appeal and to review any charges. So we do have some officers that are currently under review under the Brady list, but they are still going through that process.
Hypothetically, if these officers were to be found of wrongdoing, would that jeopardize the investigations since this has happened in the last months of their testimony?
Mayor and Council, no, I don't believe that they would be separate reviews because they're separate standards.
Okay, I think what I'm trying to say is if we found officers of wrongdoing or making things up or doing whatever they were doing, I think that jeopardizes their testimony in any cases moving forward if they participate after that, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, Council Member, I misunderstood your question. Yes, absolutely. If they are placed on the Brady list, if an officer is placed on the Brady list, then any further cases where they will be a witness, that must be disclosed to the defense counsel, and then that is put under review. So it would be on a case-by-case basis.
So are we making defense counsels or public defenders or anyone aware of the officers that are currently being looked at or that were part of this investigation?
Correct, Council Member. If anyone is under review or is on the list, then our prosecutors will make any defense counsel aware of that potential.
Okay. I think just on this, Ed, it would be appreciated if we have some determinate actions on this. I know we're talking about chief policy changes, but I do think as a city, it's our responsibility to look into this and make sure that this doesn't happen again, but officers that have already proven to not be truthful, to not be testifying. Other question I had for Ed, we had a discussion this past spring regarding reparations or support to the folks that were directly impacted. Is there any plans to allocate funds of those who were wrongfully charged? Or is there any other plans of how we can support those that were wrongfully charged, whether they had lost wages, lost their jobs, lost their homes, or any other needs that they may have?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Generally speaking, the court system is the place for people to seek repayment or reparations. However, if the City Council were to make a policy action to establish something, we would implement it. But at this point, staff has no plans to do that. We would await any direction from the council on that issue.
So that is something that council can take into their hands. If we decide these situations were egregious enough, we can make a vote to create a fund to support the folks that were wrongfully arrested?
I believe so, but I would encourage the council to get legal advice before doing that. But I think that could be a policy action of the council.
Thank you. One of the most concerning things from this whole investigation was the sense that this was not sense, it literally said in the report that this was a department-wide problem. And I guess turning back to the chief on this, and I know you've pointed out some of the steps you're trying to take. What has me concerned is we already had policies in place, and those policies were disregarded, ignored, or outright disobeyed. And so with these new policy changes, I think, how can we trust that you will be able to implement and hold folks accountable both to the policies that currently exist and the ones that are coming in the future?
So, Vice Mayor, a great question. First and foremost, I want to start off by saying the filing of gang charges against the demonstrators should have never happened. It was a bad idea. Systems were bypassed, personnel matters were bypassed, communication was broken down, so it flat out was a bad idea. So in order to make sure that policy is being followed, we do have a Compliance and Oversight Bureau that's headed up by a civilian member that will regularly conduct audits. It's also mine and my team's responsibility to have face-to-face conversations with units, with employees, to make sure that they understand the seriousness of this. And as I mentioned before, any First Amendment activity where felony charges could potentially be charged or filed, they all have to run through me. And I'll give you a great example. It's not in policy yet. We're working through that in policy. But when we had the protest at Senator Sinema's office, I made it very clear in the EOC as well as the folks on the line that if any felony charges are made, it has to be run through my level and has to be approved directly by me. So that edict has already been given. I just need to put it in policy. But to your point, I do need to conduct regular audits to make sure that this is happening.
But it wasn't just a bad idea. They broke policies, right?
Yes.
Okay. I think one of the asks from me to you, Chief, would be with these, and I think Councilwoman Ansari asked a similar thing. I would like a commitment for you to come back into some sort of policy session to show council kind of a side-by-side of the policy changes that were made because of these investigations, just so we have clarity in, you know, there was policies that we already had that were broken. We're shifting policies, but I both want to see the differences in those, but also the accountability measures. What do you have to say about the SID investigation? How did that feel to you? Was that also a bad idea or a policy miss? Or was that just, what is the perception now, your department protecting itself?
So just for memory, Vice Mayor, the SID process, they're in charge of criminally investigating any city employees, not just police. I will say in this process, the entire process has to be revamped to require my review when they don't believe probable cause is there for criminal charges, and it's determined that it's involving an employee. So what is happening is I'm not involved in the decision-making process when they don't believe that they have probable cause. So you put the chief in the mix, that requires us to have that discussion and dialogue so that I'm aware of what's going on and I can be held accountable for that as well.
Okay. Last question to you, Chief. Ballard Sparta asked for significant changes made to the TRU. I'm interested, you said some folks have been removed. I believe, and I've said publicly, that the unit should probably be disbanded, and we should think through what are the needs before we try to fix or reform what. This isn't the first time we've had issues with TRU personally, or we've had lawsuits, or we've had community come and tell us that TRU is acting in a certain way. And they're right in the middle of our next of the challenge coin conversation. So we'll be talking about them. Do you feel removing some folks is enough? And why not just disband the TRU and kind of step back and assess what the need is before we try to kind of, reform that in whatever ways you're thinking?
So, Vice Mayor, to be honest, for us to disband TRU, I think is counterintuitive to the safety of some of the folks who are downtown. We have downtown businesses, downtown organizations, and others. Do we need to revamp? Yes, we do need to revamp. But I also believe having that outside entity of 21CP provide some guidelines to me would be quite helpful. My concern would be if there is an incident or if there is an event right now, we do have a responsibility to keep people safe as well as keep the businesses safe. So as opposed to just saying disband, I think we need to work through this process. I've inserted myself as well as my assistant chiefs more so into this process. We have a new commander over the Tactical Response Unit and the Downtown Operations Unit. We have a new lieutenant over the Downtown Operations Unit and the Tactical Response Unit. And that unit is now going to have all of its training given to the Training Bureau as opposed to having them run their own training themselves. So we want to standardize that training. So we're taking away some pieces and moving pieces and getting new bodies in. But I do believe that it would be irresponsible not to have a Tactical Response Unit, especially in the fifth largest city in the nation, especially when we have national events and other things that happen downtown.
Okay. And I guess back to Ed, I want to speak a little, and these are my last set of questions, and sorry for taking a lot of time. I want to hear from community folks as well. But Ed, I have some questions. We made some changes in the plea contract, the MOU this year. And I just wanted to ask, is there a violation in their contract for disregarding some of the accountability clause in the way that folks may have participated or not participated in this investigation, and also moving forward with the DOJ, just want to make sure that, is there anything we can do as a city? And I understand that Ballard Spar did not have, they did not have, they couldn't subpoena folks, but they were under kind of your advisement. Is there any friction or anything that happened there that might have gone against the new accountability clause?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I think it's important first to note that the vast majority of the work that Ballard Spar did with employees occurred before July 1st, which was when the new MOU took effect. But it's important also to note that the MOU that the council approved, we negotiated, made some important clarifications that are in effect after July 1st, particularly as it relates to the clear authority of city agencies to conduct investigations of Phoenix police officers. That was one of the changes that we made in the MOU, was to clarify that it was not just PSB that had authority to investigate Phoenix police officers, but any city agency had that authority. So that's why I said earlier with Councilwoman Guardado, moving forward in the future, a group such as OAT or our own HR or equal opportunity departments will have clear authority to compel administrative testimony from police employees. That actually was, I think, more about Ballard Spar's status as a non-city agency than the other way. But the MOU that the council approved, I think, addresses them, and the addition of OAT address a majority of issues that we encountered.
So employees were given added pay for agreeing to those accountability measures. What would happen if they were to violate this moving forward? Councilwoman Guardado played the scenario out as if Office of County Transparency would have done this. What would be consequences if they weren't to participate with O or any other city department?
Yes, Council, Mayor, Vice Mayor. The penalty for not complying with administrative investigations or with not participating or cooperating are discipline that can be up to and including termination.
Okay. There's mentions of things that had prevented this investigation or other investigations or clauses that are in the MOU. Community members have been naming the police contract as a barrier to transparency and accountability, and have asked for these negotiations to be public. First question is, and I don't know if it's to Jeff or someone that knows the contract a little bit better, what things within the MOU prevented this investigation from going further or finding things, or can prevent further investigations from being fulfilled?
We may have to do a little more research on that, but I'll look to Assistant Attorney Julie Cree if she has any thoughts on that.
Mayor and Council, I would agree with what the City Manager referenced earlier with the changes in the MOU. There really isn't anything currently in the MOU that would prohibit or prevent the city from conducting those types of internal investigations with OAT in the future.
Thank you for that. And then just last thing, the comment, I think for Ed, it'd be important to try to figure out how do we bring back that proposal or the thought of possibly having public negotiations next time around, particularly with police and their MOU. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Waring.
Thank you, Mayor. So I had a couple questions sort of follow up with the chief. But first, I just want to say, Chief, you've been in charge of the department for almost 5 years. This obviously isn't the best day the department's had, but you've done a fine job. I support your efforts, and I hope you continue. Having said that, if my understanding as a non-police officer, if I was just listening at home, I guess I would take it this way. A lot of the rules for this unit weren't maybe as clearly delineated as they maybe could have been or should have been. You're going to address that. And these charges that normally wouldn't have been reviewed by you, not that they aren't serious, but they weren't serious enough to rise to that level, and I'll get to that in a second, will now be reviewed by you going forward. Is that a fair summary?
So Councilman Waring, to your point, if it has, moving forward, if it has anything to do with First Amendment protests and felony charges, I am now mandated that it has to go through me. However, at this point, at the point in time when this incident happened, it would not have normally run through me because Phoenix PD filed different charges initially. The county attorney's office led us through the gang charge piece.
I will just point out, this has come up at other meetings. Chief, please correct my numbers if I'm wrong, but I'm doing this from memory. Phoenix police officers have, I think, please tell me if I'm wrong, about 1.2 million contacts with the public every year. Is that accurate?
Councilman Waring, yes.
And if I remember, and this is somewhat dated information, I don't think I have the most recent year's information, those contacts results, because not everyone's, some people are asking for directions. I'm sure that's all in there too. But overall, it's 1.2 million human contacts is what we've been told at previous meetings, maybe a little different this particular year. And those contacts resulted, generally speaking, between about 30 and 40,000 arrests. Am I correct in that? That's what I sort of remember. It varies from year to year, but is that accurate, roughly?
So I'm going to say roughly yes. I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, but that could be right.
I just don't want to understate or mislead anybody in the audience. So my point is, of those, let's just say 35,000, how many reach your desk now? And at what point does it become unworkable for you to look at all of those? Well, I mean, at some point, people only have so much time in a day if they're one individual. So I think you see what I'm getting at. At what point does it impinge on you doing other tasks that you have to do?
So Councilman Waring, if you're talking about our day-to-day operations and making sure we're responding to calls for service, making the arrests we're supposed to, follow up with those kind of arrests, we're definitely being impacted by that because of the number of calls for service that we have and the violence increase potential that those calls for service have.
Chief, I think the question is how many charges today have to go through you in the way that you've laid it out here? I think the question is, are you starting to put too many things through your office?
I hear you. So thank you for that clarification, boss. I'm sorry about that, Councilman Waring. So I don't think that me being the person to look at these First Amendment charges is going to be too arduous. Quite frankly, I think we owe it to my employees, we owe it to the community to make sure that we're getting things right. If it does become arduous, that's when I have a conversation with the city manager's office about trying to figure out how to balance that workload. But I don't think at this time it would be too arduous. Just for memory's sake, we had about 170 days of protests. So we're not talking a lot when we look at the number of people who were arrested and if they were arrested for felony charges for First Amendment.
No, I appreciate that. And I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying at some point, there's only so much one person can do. You're human. There's only so many hours in a day. So if all 35,000 charges come to you in a year, that's just not realistic. And at that point, your ability to discern the merits of each charge would also be impacted because you'd be so overwhelmed. Plus, you have all the other responsibilities you highlighted in your first answer. I mean, it's obviously a big job. But I just, that's, your day obviously better than I do, but just want to make sure you don't get overextended when you do this reorganization. That would be a concern of mine as I heard what was being said and as I read the report. Switching gears to something else. So again, as a layperson, not an attorney or a police officer, and never worked in the county attorney's office, is it I assume it's common for the officers to work with the attorneys in the county attorney's office. This is not an atypical situation in that sense. That's correct, I assume.
That is accurate, Councilman Waring. We work with the county attorney's office on all of our felony charges to include homicides, ag assaults, robberies, you name it. We have a regular working relationship with that office.
Yeah, so, you know, a working relationship has been established over a long period of time. You know, it is disappointing that there doesn't seem to have been a break anywhere, as has been alluded to before. But don't the county attorneys, if like there's an officer involved shooting or something like that, they go out and look at the scenes, right? I mean, they're pretty active right from the start.
So, Councilman Waring, that is true. When we have a critical incident and an officer involved shooting, the county attorney's office is on site doing the walkthrough with us.
But for charges like this, they wouldn't have come out for this. They wouldn't have been there like face to face like they would in a situation like that.
So, Councilman Waring, early on, if my memory serves me correctly, I do believe we had representatives from a lot of entities. When the protests first started in May and June, we had members from all over the place in the EOC working with us. So I'll have to check to see if they were in the EOC, but we were working with them through that process early on in the demonstrations.
The point is kind of the same one as the questions to you. I mean, at some point, you run out of county attorneys, so I assume they can't come out for every, not that this isn't important, but obviously, as you suggested, there's also violent crimes, and they have to do previous cases, and it all stacks up. So I was just curious if any of them were on scene. It sounds like it's unclear, but maybe doubtful, if I understood your answer, or at least, at the very least, that's not 100% known. So I know you talked a little bit about, and I think some of the members that have spoken had also talked a little bit about the reforms that have taken place. I know I received a list, I think it was from your office, but certainly the department. I think there was, again, I think it was 46 items over the last approximately 5 years of different reforms that have been undertaken by the department long before these so they weren't protest specific. They go back, like I said, 5 years. Did any of those impact this situation in any kind of positive way?
Councilman Waring,
and I'm sure you don't have to go over the list committed.
So I think that's a good question. I'm sorry to cut you off. We had the ability to deploy body-worn cameras, and I know the body-worn cameras made an impact of us being able to capture what was going on. So that was one of the big reforms that we've had in the time that I've been the chief, is rolling out the body-worn cameras, not just on patrol, but also on the tactical response unit officers. So positively, we were able to capture the information on body-worn camera video.
It just seems the list, when it was produced, again, I think it was 46 items. It might be 49. I can't remember the exact number, but it was a pretty extensive list. Some of the things, frankly, I would say the vast majority of the things weren't things that the council voted on. They were things that you took from either your colleagues around the country or just throwing good ideas or staff, and then you went ahead. From memory, I think there were only a handful of things that we actually had to vote on that list. But I assumed you were doing that to obviously improve the department. But it seemed like a pretty extensive list, whether I agreed with everything on it or not. Can you tell me, do you feel like the Phoenix Police Department was being aggressive in trying to improve with all these changes compared to peer departments? You know, one would be the same size Dallas or something like that. Is there any way to compare that and to know just going forward?
Councilman Waring, I don't know if there is a way to compare. There is a way to quantify all the things that we've done in 5 years, and I can get that list to you, to include adjustments in our use of force policy. I think I've been beyond aggressive in making sure that when policy needs to be changed and adjusted to make the community safe and make it safer for the officers, we're going to make that change. And I'm communicating those changes, everything to include use of force, eliminating the carotid control technique, removing side handle batons, requiring de-escalation policies. But I can get that list to you at a later date.
Okay, I appreciate that because I do believe that you've done what you've done to the best of your abilities. With 1.2 million contacts a year, it's not perfect. This is not a good situation that we find ourselves in now. But I just wanted to say publicly, I do appreciate your efforts to try to improve things in the department, which I fully support the department, but I also think there's always room for improvement as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate you indulging me.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Gordado, followed by Councilwoman Pastor. Okay, we will go first to Councilwoman Pastor.
Thank you. I'm actually not really sure how to approach this or say what I really want to say in the sense of just a lack of disappointment and the fact that 3 of us had to sign a letter to ask for an investigation. And with the investigation coming out, it's just lack of trust all the way around this whole system. But I have to say, and I think there's a lot of good happening within our system and leadership there. It's just we need to provide or guide and help our leadership in the sense of lifting and changing, but this is a culture issue within our city and change needs to happen. Our community has changed. Our community is evolving. We are all different and how we handle things are different from what it was in the past. And we have to embrace that change is moving and happening and transition is happening. And how do we move forward and embrace the change and change a culture? One of the items that I'm really looking at is if, and I heard it with Councilman Garcia or Vice Mayor Garcia had mentioned, what would happen to a city employee who refuses to talk to OAT? And we have added language on all MOUs that if there is an investigation, that there's an obligation to meet with those in running the investigation. So if somebody just flats out and says, I'm not participating, then what would be, would they continue on with the city, or what would be the reason? Because we need that investigation. So that's to the city manager, because what I heard was, oh, there's levels and possibly termination. I believe when there's an investigation going on and refusal of participating, and I know there's due process, really ultimately it should be termination. So I would like to hear that.
Yes, a failure to participate is grounds for termination.
Thank you. And what I also heard is there's a possibility that all agencies would have conflict. So if there's conflict with all the agencies within our state with this case, then what do we do? And then how do we hold people accountable?
Councilman, you're referring to the referring of the criminal to an outside agency, I'm assuming?
Correct.
Yeah. Well, I guess if no one agrees to take it, then we would have to find a way inside the city of Phoenix to do the criminal investigation in a way that minimized or eliminated any conflict of interest. We're trying to do, for the most transparency and trust, we're trying to have an agency that does not include Phoenix police officers do the criminal investigation. If we absolutely had to, we would have to find a way for Phoenix police officers to do that investigation. because we can't just simply let it drop.
And what would the likelihood of that happening?
I really have no
'Cause-
way of predicting
Okay.
that. I'm
Because
hopeful
what
that
happens-
Tucson will find that the scope of this is not so extensive that they can't do it, but I can't speak for Tucson, and I actually give a lot of credit to Tucson because they and Yavapai County have been the most willing to actually consider and do this. Yavapai explained a legal conflict to the city attorney that he agreed with, and so they were out. Tucson is giving it their best effort to try to do it, and I give them lots of credit for that.
Well, thank you. The other thing is I wanted to know what the purpose of the gang department. What is the expectation of the gang department?
Councilwoman Pastor, this is Chief Williams. So the gang unit exists because we do have gangs in the city of Phoenix that have high violence potential, high criminal elements. So they're responsible for the identification of, the filing of gang charges, as well as at times training our employees and other folks across the state on gang charges and how to properly identify gang members.
And so what I'm hearing is that they're the ones that vet or place gang charges. Am I wrong or?
So that is not what, Councilwoman Pastor, that is not what happened in this incident. If you remember the Ballard and Spar, as well as the Judge Steinley's report from the County Attorney's Office, that whole gang process was bypassed by line-level employees with the insistence or conjunction with the County Attorney's Office. So the gang unit wasn't responsible for that. That process was bypassed.
Yes, thank you. That was my intent for the question, because it was bypassed, and people did violate policy, and I think that needs to be very clear. And it's unfortunate because it puts us in this situation that we're in today. Because then once again, there's a lack of trust, and there's lack of trust all the way around. And when people have, and we know this, when there's within myself, when I have lack of trust, I'm not going to communicate with you. And that's how the community feels. They are now at the point, and they had been coming to us years and years as I sat on the council saying, we don't trust what is happening. And here are some examples. I would like to know how, or maybe I can't remember the name, is C something, or 21C, I think it is. I would like to know and see how we ensure very clear communication, and it's not just the Phoenix PD, I think it's also the city, but right now we're talking about this in a vertically and horizontally way, so this doesn't happen again. Or at least try our hardest for this not to happen again. And I would like to see that communication, that process, and really look at how things move all across the system in order for it to not to happen again. It's a big task, but I think you have a lot of experts around you. The question is for, I believe, Ed. I don't know. How does removing employees or really demoting employees change behavior? Because this is a behavior. What happened was a behavior or a mindset. And by demoting them, that doesn't necessarily their behavior changes. So what is in place for these employees to watch behavior and make sure something like this doesn't happen?
Well, the purpose of discipline is to communicate the severity of the action. As you mentioned, there were policies and protocols that were bypassed deliberately, and communication that did not happen. So the discipline is designed to communicate to the employee the level of severity of what happened and communicate to the organization that it's excuse me that it's not acceptable. I haven't talked to these employees, the chief has, but I would tell you that people who take professional pride in what they do and have this happen to them, it is a very, very sobering event in their professional life that that makes a big difference, I think. But what you have to do is you have to watch that, as you mentioned, continue to monitor the actions of those employees with what they do.
And I agree, but I think also what ends up happening is, how do you trust them? I mean, trust is major within the public safety, in fire and in police. And it is another trust dynamic. And so I think I don't know how you fix it, but it leads to that. And I'm only saying that because I have heard officers talk to me and say, especially when I've been working on some of the wellness pieces, say to me, you know what, if I do this, this, and this for my wellness, my partner won't trust me, so I won't do it.
Well, I think,
and so I go back to, once again, it's the culture.
I've answered a lot of questions about trust. Yeah. I've answered a lot of questions about trust in the last 3 weeks, and they're important questions and they're right questions. What I know is trust is something that it takes years to gain and takes a split second to lose. And so I wouldn't ask people to just trust us just because. I would ask people to have trust only when it is earned and demonstrated. And that's the difficulty is, again, it takes a long time to gain and a very short time to lose. And then you start right back down at the bottom of the mountain, and you have to keep demonstrating through actions and results that align with words that trust can be regained. But that's a decision that, people have to make as they weigh what they're seeing. But I mean, you've hit the heart of it, Councilwoman, exactly.
And the final, and it's just really kind of a statement, and I don't know. I'm going to reiterate what Councilman Waring stated, is that Chief Williams, you run a large department and you cannot oversee everything. And you have to trust the people around you to do their job. And I understand how not everything, but what needs to go needs to be vetted, and you will dot the I and cross the T. But I'm hoping that department gets to the point where you don't have to dot the I and cross the T's, because you can trust the people around you to do the right thing and do what's fair and right. The bottom line is that people lied. People put 14 people's lives in jeopardy. Lives that they have their First Amendment right. They have their right to protest. And then it spiraled into a gang charge, a fake gang at that. And people that we trusted, because I was taught to trust people of authority, especially police, then are found guilty or are found of lying. And that's the shameful part. My question is, that I'm going to end with, is how is the city going to fund the lawsuits that are going to come our way?
Mayor, Councilman Pastor, the city has a self-insured reserve where we place money to address any judgments placed against the city. We have a strong and healthy reserve, although certainly it is something we have to watch and be mindful of.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilwoman Guardado, followed by Councilwoman Ansari.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted so I had a question given something that I found on the report, and I was a little confused by it. So I'll just read it. It says, "It bears noting, however, that we reached these findings without the benefit of all possible information. PPD did not provide certain information we requested, and on multiple occasions, certain relevant information was provided to the investigation team several weeks after that information was known to PPD." So with that statement, my question was, is there certain information that you guys could share with us that you guys asked for and until this day was never provided?
I think that would be a question for Mr. Hockheimer.
Yes.
Yeah. So Councilwoman Guardado, we actually communicated to Mr. Zerker some of the areas that we found deficient in the city's production. There are several areas. One relates to the forms that are used. They're known as gimmick forms. That's short for the gang member identification cards. We asked for those, any gimmick cards that were filled out in connection with the charges relating to these protesters. We found that the police department had submitted one or more gimmicks for entry into GangNet, but the Department of Public Safety rejected those forms, apparently determining that ACAB does not meet the criteria for entry into the gang intelligence system. But we never got the underlying gimmick forms, and I will defer to my colleague Brad just to confirm that. But that whole issue, which our report lays out, there were 2 incident reports that were filed by the sergeant who presented this matter before the grand jury. And the second incident report was actually following the testimony he provided to the grand jury. And that report included what our investigation found was sort of after the fact papering of the record in order to bolster or justify the gang charges. But Brad Gershell, do you have anything further on that?
Sure, Mr. Hockheimer, thank you. The one point I would add is that the second incident report filed by the sergeant was filed the day after an important meeting that took place on October 23rd, which, as detailed in our report, was the meeting where it was decided, and meeting of bears emphasis, was attended by high-ranking officials within the department and throughout other law enforcement agencies, that the Maricopa County Attorney's Office should, in fact, seek the indictment of the various protesters under the gang statute. The second incident report being filed the day after that meeting had taken place raises significant red flags. And just to signify one, these incident reports under PPD policy are required to be completed by arresting officers as soon as possible after the incident has taken place. And here, the incident report, the second incident report, quite obviously was not.
Okay. And I guess, Ed, my question for you is then, given the answer, how do we resolve this? How do we make sure that this never happens again?
Right. Thank you, Councilman Guardado. So I have tasked Chief Assistant City Attorney Julie Cree with leading the review of those instances that Ballard Spar communicates to the City Attorney's Office, and to get a report on, in each case, what was the issue. And then she and the Chief will follow up on what changes need to be made, or if there's any administrative investigations that need to take place as to if there is employee misconduct in the withholding of that. And then we will make that report, we'll review that report with the city council when it's completed.
Great. Okay.
Because
Thank
I
you.
agree with you, that was one of the most concerning findings to me, was the lack of information flow that Ballard Spar found from within the city.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ansari.
Thank you, Mayor. This question goes back to the point where we were talking about the First Amendment issues and incidents going directly to the chief. I guess I just want to say I obviously think this is a really good step, but it's clearly a reactive response to horrific, atrocious assault on First Amendment rights that almost led to wrongful imprisonment. And I guess I'm just wondering, are there any policies or things that we're looking at that go beyond recommendations that were outlined in the investigations that are more proactive, looking at things that maybe we've had small issues with but haven't blown up to this extent? What are we doing in that regard, if anything, and what can we do, I guess, just overall to be more proactive as opposed to responding to something a year later following a massive national scandal and what could have been devastating to the lives of these individuals?
So, Councilwoman Ansari, to your point, again, raising the level at this moment in time to the police chief is one of the critical issues. As we move forward in this process of identifying some best practices across the country, as we move forward in the process of 21 CP, giving us some guidance and directions on some of the things that we can do, we will move forward with those. But suffice to say that there has been definitely a shaking and reverberation in the Phoenix Police Department as a result of some of the disciplinary action that has happened. It was definitely not taken lightly. It is very serious. And multiple conversations with the command team have been had. So we understand and know how critical this is to our city, to our department, and to the law enforcement profession in general. So to whatever degree we can learn, grow, and change, we will. To whatever degree we need to be held accountable, we will be. And to whatever degree we can try to move the needle and bridge the gap in trust, we will do.
And I guess sort of to the looking at the flip side of what Councilman Waring and Councilwoman Pastor said in regards to things coming to your desk, are there any other issues that you feel may need to come directly to you beyond First Amendment rights, or at this point is that the only type of situation or change that you're making in regards to things needing your full awareness or approval?
I think the city manager mentioned it. Anything that has a nexus or something that would be critical to the city council, to members of our community, high profile instances, all have to come directly to me so that I'm aware, so that I can inform you all as well as the city manager.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Stark.
You're on mute.
I am on mute. Still, after all these months, you would think I know how to turn on the button and turn it off. Chief, I want you to know that I support you. You have a large department. There's a lot of personalities in that department. I've gotten to know quite a few officers. As you know, I go to Coffee with a Cop. I go to various events, and you have a lot of great staff. And you have some bad apples, but I really still support the department. And I want to thank you for being proactive after these two incidents. But, I worry about the morale in the department, and I'm just curious, what are you doing? What is your leadership doing to keep our officers in a good space? Because we still need the police department. When I call 911, I want you to come. And I know you provide good service. So what are you doing, you and your leadership?
So, Councilwoman Stark, thank you for that question. I do have men and women who serve honorably, and I'll stand on the shoulders with them, neck and neck, to make sure that we're still doing the right thing. So I think in building morale, it's maintaining and having a constant relationship with our labor organizations to make sure that the labor organizations know why we're making the decisions that we're making. It's getting our assistant chiefs out to briefings to talk directly to employees, to explain to them why things are happening. Chief Kurtenbach and I spent some time a couple of months ago briefing all the lieutenants and all of the patrol precincts just to kind of let them know what was happening and what was going on. It's also showing up at community events to support the officers as well as our community members. We had the opportunity, myself, Chief Kurtenbach, and Chief Conley, had the opportunity to sit with Sean Pearson's group in Zion Ministries at a Tough Talk conversation. Assistant City Manager Jeff Barton was there also. So having the opportunities to engage and have the officers engage, I believe, is going to increase morale. Also, if you recall, we've had to assign some specialty to patrol on a rotating basis, and at first it wasn't met with rave reviews, for sure, with some of our employees. But after folks have gone out in patrol and they see what's going on, they can lend their experience and their mentorship. We are now finding that those folks who are going back to patrol for that short period of time are enjoying themselves and are getting their radio ear back, for lack of a better term. You have to hear the radio and the tones, but they're also mentoring those young officers. You all know, and you all approved us to be able to create some hiring incentives as well as some signing bonuses, so I think those will play too. But just that constant communication and reassurance to our officers, our command team, that we can move forward through this together because we're a strong police department.
And I agree with that. And I again, overall, the majority of the officers do a terrific job. They're great people. They love their jobs and they want to do right by the public. I really do believe that. And, you know, I think you're taking some great steps. I know you're working with the city manager's office. So just one last question. Do you feel confident that you and your department can get past this and really work to better solutions? It's a tough question. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I'm you. You would think by like 20 years from now I could figure out how to turn on a microphone. So without a doubt, without question, I'm absolutely certain we'll get through this. And Councilwoman Stark, I forgot one key point. I'm cognizant of the mental health challenges that are impacting our employees. We've doubled our employee assistance unit. We are requiring some mandated mental health check-ins. So those of us who've been on 30 plus years, early on in our careers, we didn't have the benefit of having that mental health, i.e. peer health, i.e. chaplain piece. We are learning to embrace that, and our employees are most definitely taking advantage of those opportunities.
Thank you. And Mayor, thank you. I know we're living in tough times today. There's so much hate out there, and it's not just the police department. I just feel it everywhere. People are not getting along. I just want to make sure we can change that. And I think I see that's going to happen in the police department. I certainly hope it happens elsewhere. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman Stark. Could not agree more. Do any other council members have comments or questions on the Portion A 2020 protests? It's been an important discussion. We want to work to have a safe city with constitutional policing. We will continue our conversation and turn it back to our city manager, Ed Zerker, to discuss the challenge coin, item B.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As we discussed, there actually are two reports that we commissioned Ballard Spar to investigate on our behalf. The 1B item that we're going to talk about today is related to a challenge coin investigation. I will turn it back to Mr. Hockheimer for his input, and then I will, like last time, go through what we've done in response, and then we'll be available to answer all your questions and take comment. Hank? Okay,
thank you, Mr. Zerker. As Mr. Zerker mentioned, and as you all know, we were also retained to do an investigation into the issuance and distribution of a challenge coin. We have a PowerPoint for that as well that we can put up on the screen. In February of this year, we were retained to investigate the challenge coin. just to reset a little bit, a challenge coin, and there's a picture of the one that is at issue here on this first slide. A challenge coin is something that's routinely traded among law enforcement agencies. Within law enforcement agencies, it often commemorates a milestone or an achievement, and it fosters often goodwill among officers. This one, however, kind of went off the tracks for reasons that we'll talk about in a second. Just to give the context of this, there was a protest that occurred in Phoenix on August 22nd of 2017. The protest was in reaction to then President Trump's visit to Phoenix. He was participating in a rally during his time in Phoenix. And during the course of a protest that occurred on August 22nd, 2017, an individual was shot with munitions in his groin area. Soon thereafter, in fact, a day after, on social media, a picture that's similar to the one that's depicted on this slide appeared on various social media accounts with a caricature of a gentleman having flames and things coming out from his groin area after having been hit by munition. Just to note, he was hit by munition after he had kicked a pepper spray canister back towards a line of policemen, and that action then resulted in him being shot with the munition in the groin area. As you see on the front of that, it says "Good night, left nut" is the phrase on the coin, and that was the phrase that appeared on August 23rd on 2017 in social media. So we were brought in to basically answer just a few questions, which we'll get to on the next slide, which is the scope of our investigation. And that is, number one, who created the coin, whether anybody within the Phoenix Police Department came up with the idea and created this coin. Second, who possessed or distributed the coin within the department. Third, were city funds used in the creation and or distribution of the coin? And finally, is there a connection between the coin and white supremacist ideology and or hate speech? We'll go to the next slide, please. So our investigation findings are as follows. We found that at least 30 members of the Phoenix Police Department at one time possessed the coin or related memorabilia. The creator of the image and sayings in the coin could not be determined. We identify members of the department most involved in the dissemination of the coin, and that some coins and memorabilia were exchanged on city property while on duty. We found no evidence to support the idea that city funds were used in the creation of the coins or memorabilia, but we did find that distribution of the coin did occur between supervisors and subordinate officers. Next slide, please. Officers in possession of the coin who we interviewed recognized the connection between making America great again, one nut at a time, and President Trump's political campaign. We also found that there is an apparent connection between "Good night, left nut" and white supremacist ideology and or hate speech, "Good night, left side," which is the phrase that has been associated with white supremacy and alt-right dogma, but no finding that any officer, we did not find any officer that was aware of any connection between the white supremacist ideology and the origin of "Good night, left side" and how it may have influenced the "Good night, left nut" text on the coin and other memorabilia. We further found that members of the department leadership knew about the coins as early as the fall of 2017 and engaged in an informal fact-finding effort that was not documented. Executive police leadership was unaware of these efforts or failed to follow up on them. And I'll note on that, so just to reset it a bit, like I said, on August 22nd, 2017 was the protest. We saw images soon thereafter, as early as August 23rd, 2017, of the individual who was shot with the munitions with the phrase "Good night, left nut." Sometime in the fall of 2017, as our report lays out in detail, a box of memorabilia appeared at the Downtown Operations Unit in Phoenix. And that box, according to witnesses we interviewed, officers we interviewed, contained various memorabilia that had the caricature of the individual as well as the good night left nut text. The items included T-shirts, patches, hats, perhaps coins, but we couldn't confirm that. We talked to one officer who said that the box of memorabilia that showed up was ultimately thrown in a dumpster, but it also apparently sat in a conference room for some period of time. A commander at the time was charged with determining who grabbed items from the box and who may have kept or decided to distribute internally any of those items. That commander was tasked with essentially an investigation and review of who might have had access to the box and who took stuff out of it. Unfortunately, that commander has since is deceased, and we were not able to find any documentation or any support for whatever inquiry that he conducted in connection with the receipt of this memorabilia. But it did come sometime, maybe weeks or maybe a month or two after the initial incident. Next slide, please. The recommendations we've made is that there should be a follow-up investigation by the Professional Standards Bureau for possible officer discipline. We also have recommended that the department adopt new policies relating to challenge coins and memorabilia in addressing improper or hate speech and related issues, and strengthen existing policies relating to political activity on duty, and also any disparagement of protesters or civilians. We also, based upon that apparent or purported review that was done in the fall of 2017 by the now deceased commander, that the Phoenix Police Department improve investigation and fact-finding efforts. So if there is an investigation that's launched into an issue like this, it will be documented, and people like us or other people within the department, more importantly, would be able to have access to it and see what in fact was done at the time. And we're now several years after this, and the ability to come up with what happened during that fact-finding investigation has been limited, to say the least. Next slide. I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Hank, for that report. And again, Mayor, members of the council, for the members of the public, the reports are available to the public to read the entire reports that Hank has described at Phoenix.gov and go to the newsroom section. So as Hank referenced, challenge coins exist in police departments and military units across the country. They are widely used to build team spirit and celebrate an accomplishment. I found a challenge coin on my shelf just today, which I received from our communication operators, the Phoenix Police Communication Bureau, our 911 operators, where they talk about being the voice of courage. So these are often given and distributed as ways to build team spirit. However, they should never, ever be used in the way that this coin was. A coin that harms, mocks, disparages, takes a partisan political position, or echoes hate speech of extremists and fascists, regardless of whether people know it or not, can never have a place in city employment, in law enforcement, or in civil society. So that was really the failure here. Not that there are coins, but that this particular coin existed, and then it revealed some gaps that we need to address. So, in follow-up to Ballard Spar, we first need to, as they recommended, investigate employee conduct as it relates to whatever we can determine about the creation, distribution of the coin. Well, again, just to reiterate what we said last time, Ballard Spar did not have authority to recommend or institute specific discipline or criminally review any city employees. Rather, their scope was defined to define areas that the city should follow up for further investigation. They provided us fact-finding so that we could take these next steps. In this case, there was no criminal conduct. So we moved to the internal administrative reviews. Employees, again, have due process rights that have to be followed as laid out in the city's civil service system and our MOUs. But that doesn't mean there's not accountability. It just means that there are guidelines and rules we have to follow in order to ensure that our employee rights are followed. So in this case, the Professional Standards Bureau, along with our Human Resources and the City Attorney's Office, are conducting follow-up investigations and administrative reviews of this, and as also was publicly noticed, the Chief Williams has also received some discipline for this. In addition, as in the last case, again, any tactical response unit personnel who are named in the report will no longer serve in the tactical response unit or the downtown operations unit, as Chief Williams described. Again, service in those units is not a right. It's not a right of employment. It's a privilege. As we go forward, strengthening policy. Again, as I mentioned, there are some real gaps that were identified in policy. In one case, we know at least we need to create a policy. In other cases, it's emphasizing and strengthening the policies that exist. So Chief Williams has already undertaken this effort and not been universally praised by her employees, but so be it. This is where we are. We need to make sure that our existing policies are clear in dealing with hate speech. It is an area that needs legal review, and we have to be very careful with that because to make sure that we're not impinging on free speech. But where we are able to prohibit hate speech, we are doing that. I've already revised the city's citywide employee administrative regulation, and Chief Williams is working on her operations orders to align with that. Prohibiting disparaging images, slogans, or statements about residents, protesters, or otherwise any client of the Phoenix Police Department is of absolute necessity and goes along with our values of respect. We to strengthen our policies about political speech while on duty. And guidelines require, this is where we found a gap, is as I mentioned with a challenge coin, there are no guidelines for challenge coins for the last 20 years, right? But now there will be guidelines requiring specific approval from the Chief's office for the creation, distribution of any commemoratives, including challenge coins, T-shirts, hats, and other things that are passed around the Phoenix Police Department or depict anything about the Phoenix Police Department. And also important guidelines for gifting of items by supervisors to subordinates to ensure that lower level staff are not put in difficult situations in whether or not to receive something from a supervisor. Additionally, the chief is creating a new procedure for department supervisors and executives to document the informal investigations to ensure transparency. As Hank noted, there was an informal investigation done, and there's no record or way to figure out what happened because in this case, unfortunately, the commander at the time has since passed away. So the chief has already been working with her folks about ensuring that we're doing more documentation. Even when something's considered informal, there needs to be a record of it. And as we discussed in the last one, this also leads us to an assessment of the DOU and the TRU because, again, those are the units that are involved in this report, similar to the last one. So the look at how we create a TRU and a DOU that are organized for success and with respect is underway with our contracted external reviewers, 21 CP Solutions. And as Mr. Barton noted, we anticipate that will be ready in October. With that, Mayor, members of the council, that concludes our report on this one. As in the last one, Mr. Hockheimer and his team and I and my team are ready to answer questions from you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much. Council member questions. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Less of questions and more of comments. I think you hit it spot on, Ed, when you said these coins are used for team spirit. And I think, unfortunately, we're not listening when we continue to think about this bad apple argument or thought. They're literally telling us who they are, and specifically the TRU and the downtown unit. They told us with the Facebook situation where comments were being posted, and now you have an entire segment of the department that was handing these coins out. It's not a bad apple. Not only did this happen, but people saw it happen. No one said anything. They thought it was okay. Even the chief saw it and didn't do anything and that's why she was reprimanded. And we continue, like the Facebook and the social media posts, to address symptoms instead of addressing the illness of the culture that this department has shown and is literally telling us. So yeah, they probably won't pass around another coin with the policies that you've passed, just like they're probably really careful in not putting anything on social media. But we're not addressing the actual issues of the people that thought it was okay. And more important than this coin, as we had this conversation, Ed, and I had it with you, I went back to that day in 2017 because I helped organize that action. And it was a great, we had people about all ages, we had people celebrating culture, and we saw a politically motivated attack on that community. We helped get elderly folks out, children out, and this brute force just came on to the community. And this again lets you know the political standing of the folks who attacked us in that TRU unit. And so, sure, I think these policies are going to make sure that we don't have another challenge coin, or they're not going to get caught with another challenge coin. But I would really like to see how we're addressing this illness, that it's okay to have something like this. In the same year, where there's a death threat that came from the department to our mayor, that we saw the social media and how some folks in the department felt. So don't really have any questions. I just don't think it's enough, or we're not taking this serious enough as a tell of what's actually happening in the department. And it wasn't two folks that had this. It was literal supervisors giving it to their subordinates. And yeah, just telling you, Ed and Chief, what you've done with this, I hope you think about it and we look into it more, but it really signals into that culture that this department has. And I hope we start addressing that, not just making sure that they don't get caught. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ansari.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, building off of that, I similarly agree that just with the two investigations, we're clearly seeing a cultural problem and a pattern here. And I remember when you and I had spoke, being new to this, I was baffled that there's not already a zero tolerance policy for hate speech. And I'm glad that there is now a strengthened policy where hate speech is prohibited. But my question is, what exactly would the consequence now be for anyone who breaks that policy? Because from my perspective, if we're entrusting individuals in a department to keep us safe, then hate speech should have always been prohibited, and the consequences of breaking that should be significant. So I'm just wondering what that looks like.
Councilwoman Ansari, right now, just to clarify what's going on with COIN, so we do have an ongoing investigation that's in the review process by the employees involved in the COIN investigation. As was mentioned, and the world knows, I received discipline for not following up on that informal process. So we're strengthening the formal processes for the informal investigations, number one. Number two, when you talk about hate speech, all of us are taking that very seriously, so much so that it is now part of an administrative regulation, not just a police policy. So if those things come to our attention, we will begin the investigation process and investigate that, work with HR and law on deciding what the comparables are, because I don't know if you know about our discipline system, but we do have 3 different classifications. But if something is egregious, I've proven over time, I'm unafraid to take action up to and including termination.
Okay, and so you haven't yet decided what that classification will be then for hate speech?
So Councilwoman, I'm sorry, what I think I'm trying to articulate, it would be difficult for me to tell you what the comps would be because it depends on a number of different factors to include previous discipline of the employee and other things like that.
And just to clarify, sorry if this is a silly question, you would be the one to make that determination, right?
So in part, I would be the decision maker on that. I do entrust Class 1 violations to the executive officer or Chief Kurtenbach, but Class 2s and Class 3s typically rise to my level, and we discuss those and talk about those in conjunction with EOD, HR, and law to make the best decision possible in the best interest of the community and the employee.
And if there is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I apologize. I just wanted to elaborate just a second because I think your question is very important, Councilwoman. It is important to know what Chief Williams said, which is these sort of situations, and we have not had many of them, they require a team effort, and that team involves, in this case, the police department, but would involve the city attorney's office, our equal opportunity director, and our HR director as well, to make sure that we are acting as strongly as we possibly can in our system.
And can you let me know, how does this interact, like how does the MOU come into play here in regards to what disciplinary actions may or may not be taken if there is an allegation of hate speech?
Well, the MOU lays out due process for a covered employee. And so regardless of whether it's hate speech or tardiness or other things, the process piece of it is defined in the MOU and laid out in our civil service system as well. So the MOU, I don't think, is a barrier in any way. It just lays out the process that we follow to give employees their due process as we investigate and then determine discipline.
Okay. Yeah, I think on this, my only comment would be just, again, if we're entrusting individuals in a department to keep us safe, then every single person, despite their background, race, gender, whatever it may be, needs to feel safe. And it's, very concerning that hate speech, whether it's in the form of the challenge coin or otherwise, have any role in the department. So I hope that, that can be, whether how it's classified, whether it's going to be on a case-by-case basis or if it's standardized, I think it's extremely egregious for it to take place at all. Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you.
Mayor?
Councilman DeCiccio.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. So are we debating the fact that we are short over 1,000 police officers? No, we're not. Are we debating the fact that we have violent crime ready to soar in the city of Phoenix? Nope, we don't have that. We're not debating that either today. We're not debating the fact that we don't have enough police officers to make the response times for the public who deserves better from us. That's not what we're debating today. We're debating a coin the size of a quarter. That is the priority of the city of Phoenix here today. The reason that nobody's taking this thing seriously and why the police shouldn't have done it, I think we spent way too much time, too much energy, too much money, too much effort debating a coin, tens of thousands of dollars that we've spent, when there are bigger issues facing us. This is beyond silly. There was no hate here. There was no nothing. The Phoenix, some of the police department members mocked a guy who was assaulting them. That's it. This individual was ready to assault a police officer, and he's being mocked. Big deal. That's not hate. That's not anything else. This has become a thing of silliness now. This piling on the police department is ridiculous. It's just one constant piling on after another, and you start to wonder why people don't want to work for the city of Phoenix. This is it. So, Mayor, I think this is all crazy. I still can't believe we're even debating a coin the size of a quarter. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman Guardado.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just have a couple of comments. I know we have people waiting to speak on this as well. But I just wanted to say, since I have been in office, I have said time and time again that accountability is fundamental for all of us public servants. I have made it a priority to build relationships with those we serve to strengthen public trust. I am willing to have those conversations and those hard conversations. Months ago, I joined fellow council members in calling for a full independent investigation into the false charges against individuals being prosecuted as gang members. What the investigations uncovered should be of deep concern for all of us in our city. While some recourse has been taken with our city management, it is now crystal clear for all to see that the issues today rise above any administration action that can be taken. I am not willing to look the other way. The lack of compliance our city management and those involved provided in these investigations is a complete failure of public trust, a failure which seeks to obscure the full story of what really happened and who was really involved, but also a deeper failure, a failure of public servants to accept transparency and accountability as their obligation to those they serve. I join my fellow council members to call for today's special meeting because we need to see meaningful action. These independent investigations and those that wish to obscure their findings through noncompliance have only helped underscore the urgent need of the Office of Accountability and Transparency. When we were looking at this and looking at the different models throughout the country, we've had different states, different cities come in and tell us how is it that their Office of Accountability was built. And one of them that stands out to me a lot, and I know Ed, you and I talked about this before, was Denver. You know, one of the things that they said, and the biggest shift that they had to make was being able to say, yes, we have a problem, we have an issue, we need to fix it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying we have a problem, we have an issue, we need to shift the way we do things. I know that that is starting to happen. I know that I wish things moved a lot faster than what they do, but I'm definitely ready to continue to be part of that shift and part of that change. I think there definitely has to be a cultural change within the department. In the last 10 years, the city has grown so much. And the people that live in this city are very different from what they used to be 20, 30 years ago. And things need to change and we need to look at things differently. And I'm hopeful that we will make those changes and have these hard conversations and being able to make the change that we need to make. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mayor. As I've stated in my previous comments, I do not condone inappropriate actions from City of Phoenix employees, no matter who they are. And contrary to comments we've heard today, the actions of a few do not constitute a cultural problem. Unfortunately, in society, individuals make bad decisions. And as we teach our children, bad decisions are met with disapproval and discipline. That was done. But to overgeneralize and state that this is a cultural problem with our entire city is not acceptable. Generalizations of an entire group of people is counterproductive to moving our city forward. Not all people are afraid of the cops, and on the flip side, not all police are bad. I echo Councilwoman Stark's comments that I support the police and I support you, Chief Williams. I'm in agreement that when I see an emergency happening, I need to dial 911 and that I want to be confident that you're going to show up, and I know you will. I want to commend and compliment you, Chief Williams, on your leadership and your ability to identify problems and implement solutions to rectify those problems as you've done in the past and as you have done as a result of these investigations. The solutions that you've proposed, present, and in the past are the types of community-based policing and solutions we need more to build on. As the chair of the Subcommittee on Public Safety and Justice, I'm committed to working closely with you, your department, and our community to continue identifying areas of change and implementing successful solutions while ensuring continued support from our residents and our police officers. I continue to stand with and support our Phoenix Police Department and thank them for their commitment to service in keeping our families and visitors safe. And I support your leadership, Chief Williams, in identifying those problems and rectifying them. The City of Phoenix is committed to continuously improving in all aspects, especially public safety. The actions taken as a result of these investigations prove that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I am deeply troubled by an organizational culture that would allow this speech to emerge. The Ballard Spahr investigation was inconclusive as to the origins of the coin, but the fact remains that it did circulate within our department. That should be an opportunity for us as a city to be deeply reflective and to improve. We do have resources. Unfortunately, there are experts in neo-Nazis, and they have helped other departments before. The Anti-Defamation League, known as ADL, has worked extensively on these issues and has looked at what are the best practices. They have trained over 15,000 police officers, and they are willing to help us take this moment and try to turn it into opportunity to have the best educated department who will be out there most effectively fighting hate speech and calling it out when they see it. I'm looking forward to us doing better. And Chief Williams, I'm calling on you to work with the Anti-Defamation League to institute the inclusive policing training and bring that to Phoenix. I'd like to call on you to initiate ADL training with every Phoenix police officer in the next 120 days. This is another opportunity for us to become nationwide leaders. Let us take this moment, seize it, and become an even stronger city. Do we have any council member comments before we go to the many members of the public? Then I will turn to Councilwoman Pastor.
I just want to say that Councilman DeCiccio was correct that we are not debating those items, and I don't think it's a debate. I believe we can have that discussion. That's what the Public Safety Committee is for, and then we can have a bigger discussion as a council. What we're discussing and debating is a coin that was celebrating hurting people and also celebrating violating people's First Amendment rights. And so I think that's what we're discussing. And I'm not debating, we're discussing. One of the, and I don't know, maybe that's a commemorative for some people, because obviously it was created and passed around. But my bigger question to this and statement is, what is the purpose of the coin? Is there another way that you can do commemorative items other than the coin? Is this part of, once again, the culture within the public safety culture that you receive these coins? And the reason why I'm asking is because in sister cities in some of the countries, we create coins from the city to exchange coins in other countries. So I want some clarity on that.
So Councilwoman Pastor, as was mentioned by the city manager, and I believe Ballard and Spahr mentioned it as well, coins are distributed in the military and in public safety routinely to commemorate significant events. And I can give you some examples. There have been a couple of landfill digs that we have done to try to find missing bodies, and those employees who donate, provide, assist, and serve numbers of hours of service in trying to locate a loved one is critical, so we celebrate those type of things. We also have hats. We also have T-shirts. There could be coasters. I think what's being addressed here is the fact that this coin was created and there was no approval of this coin because it shouldn't have been approved for the reasons that have been previously mentioned. But I go across the country, I go across the world, and I engage with law enforcement agencies throughout the world, and coins are typically exchanged as either a commemorative item or something as a keepsake.
Understood. So I don't know what to say to that, Chief, because this coin obviously was created. So thank you.
Thank you. We will now go to our city attorney to introduce the public comment portion of today's meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the public may speak for up to 2 minutes to comment on agenda items. Comments must be related to the agenda item. Speakers must present their comments in a respectful and courteous manner. Profane language and personal attacks on members of the public, council members, or staff are not allowed. A person who violates these rules will lose their opportunity to continue to speak.
Thank you to our city attorney. And as a reminder, we will likely take a break somewhere in the vicinity of 3 p.m. I will now turn to our staff to call the members of the public here today.
Our first speaker is Art Hamilton, followed by Dr. Ann Hart. Art, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Mayor Gallego, Vice Mayor Garcia, members of the council, I'd like to thank you for this public airing of the Ballard SPAR report and the things adjacent to it. These are difficult discussions to have in public, and yet it's necessary in the issue of transparency to do just what you have done today. I applaud you for letting us, as citizens of the city, and residents, I should say, participate in this. I'd like to thank Ed Zerker, his staff, certainly Chief Williams for her wonderful leadership, and let you know that while I think as these discussions make clear, we have problems to resolve. We have, I think, the people who can do that, and I think the mayor and council, you all demonstrate a willingness to make sure that we get that done, and I thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Dr. Ann Hart, followed by Carol Coles. Dr. Hart, are you on the line? Dr. Hart, are you on the line? Oh, our next speaker is Carol Coles, followed by Michael Johnson. Carol, are you on the line? Carol, are you on the line? Okay, our next speaker is Michael Johnson, followed by Gail Knight. Oh, apologies. Oh, Carol, are you on the line?
We can hear you, but it's very faint. I can just barely hear you.
Yeah, it's still a little faint. We will come back.
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, that's so
Can you
much
hear me?
better.
Yes, she had to unmute me. Thank you so much, Mayor and council. I'm the retired Phoenix Equal Opportunity Director, former co-chair of the Community Police Trust Initiative. And back in 2015, at the invitation of the city manager, Zerker, our committee worked tirelessly to provide recommendations for increasing trust, accountability, transparency in the Phoenix Police Department. As many of you know, our substantive recommendations are the basis for many of the recent notable advances in PPD under the leadership of City Manager Zerker, yourselves, Chief Williams, and her team. Under the Chief's distinguished and committed leadership, there are notable successes in the police department, such as the deployed 2,000 body-worn cameras to police officers, banned chokeholds, implemented 8 Can't Wait, and other successes. These strategic and collaborative advances were achieved by Chief Williams. The city must continue such efforts to ensure equality and justice in the policing for all people. Continued Phoenix Police Department reforms are long overdue from a historical and contemporary perspective. Over the course of my 40-year Phoenix residency and 30-year employment with the city, calls for action and change Chief Williams as the Department of Justice proceeds with its investigation into the city and the police department, this is a time for introspection, reflection, visioning, and action. Chief Williams is an award-winning, educated, and experienced law enforcement professional with over 32 years of experience. The DOJ investigation should be led by a seasoned law enforcement professional such as Chief Williams. She will be strategic, collaborative, and hold people accountable. I give my whole
Our next speaker is Michael Johnson, followed by Gail Knight. Michael, are you on the line?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, and you may proceed.
Okay, thank you. This is former Councilman Johnson, and I want to first of all thank you, Mayor, thank the City Council for giving us this opportunity to speak before the council. Also, I want to thank Ballard Spars for their report that they gave, supportive of their recommendations, as well as supportive of the actions taken by the City Manager, Ed Zerker, as well as Police Chief Jerry Williams. I want to just really say that I was there on the council I wasn't there on the council when Chief Williams was brought on, but I have worked with Chief Williams in the past, and Chief Williams does have the support of the community. Her trust and integrity has been unchallenged and always available to us. So I want to thank Chief Williams for all her work and the continued work that she continues to do in the community. I do want to say that as being a retired police officer, as a former city councilman too, you know, I've been on the other end of these erroneous allegations that may have been made up by a few officers within the Phoenix Police Department. And I do think that we need to have police accountability and support those who are supporting police accountability. I also want to offer my condolence for those who were erroneously charged, because I understand what happens when someone is charged and have to go day by day wondering if someone's going to come arrest them or they're going to be going to prison. That is really a hard thing that you have to go through. But I'm supportive of our police department because we wouldn't be able to survive in the city without the police department. I think Phoenix has one of the best police departments in the country. We do have some issues that have to be resolved, and I'm supportive of those, and also supportive that Chief Williams would be the one to help us get through some of those changes that we have to make, and those changes that she's also already have made within the police department. So I'm supportive of Chief Williams, supportive of the City Attorney Ed Zerker, and wish to continue to support them. And I thank our City Council for taking the efforts to make sure that our police department is accountable for their actions. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Gail Knight, followed by Benjamin Lewis. Gail, are you on the line?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, and you may proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. I want to thank the Mayor and City Council and City Manager Zerker for having this report done. It is always good when we can have an outside legal opinion of activities and issues that occur, regardless of what department it is. I just want to take a moment to say to Chief Williams, you have been exemplary. I'm surprised when you were asked, how did you feel about this, that someone didn't say, how did you feel about not being respected as the chief of the department when people decided to take on activities around you instead of coming to you? And so I believe that It is time for the city of Phoenix, and I hope that the mayor and city council will be very focused on policies and processes. Ballard Spahr talked about the need for guidelines, and without processes that individuals are aware of and trained and orientated on, we'll continue to have these bad apples. They pop up every now and then, and it's always around a policy that doesn't have a process. And even though there is a compliance unit in the police department, I recommend that you all add an expert in process improvement that can identify the gaps, can help you, Chief Williams, get through that situation and know where those gaps are and recommend what you need to do for improvement of that. I want to thank Vice Mayor Garcia when he was on TV and asked about you, that he talked very positively about your service. And to Councilwoman Stark, as well as the other council and representatives today who honored you, I want to say thank you again for what you have done. And let's get this right so we continue to increase trust and positive communications with our police department. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Benjamin Lewis, followed by Onesimus Strand. Benjamin, are you on the line?
I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can, and you may proceed.
Hi. I'd like to do a bit of echoing the idea behind what the last person said, in that we have to be able to hold people accountable. And this entire charade ignores the reason that folks like me are in the streets in the first place. And that's that our police force is violent and they harm our community. And there's nothing that seems to be done about it. So we keep talking about the processes that are going to be placed in place. And earlier, what I heard from Chief Jerry Williams was, we promised to abuse protesters more legally. That doesn't build trust. We need to know that we can have a police force that is held accountable, and then we don't have to be in the streets. But we're not even moving towards that. I heard a lot about processes and policies, but none of those processes and policies resulted in the swift isolation of city employees who are harmful towards our community, or the swift termination of employees who have been found to violate just the civic ideals of nonviolence. I mean, we've got these guys out in the streets, and I get that there aren't enough of them, but one of the reasons there's not enough of them is that, you know, we know that 100 of them are on the Brady list. So you got a 1 in 30 chance that your partner is going to be a verified liar. And then 30 of them are trading these coins that celebrate violence, and nobody's been fired. So what we're telling the rest of the world, if we want police officers to come here, the type of police officers we're attracting are the ones that say, well, if you threaten to murder the mayor, you get to keep your pension. If you trade in violent tokens celebrating your mistreatment of community, you get to keep your job. And if you have to make any sort of changes that even produce any amount of transparency, you get a raise. It's ridiculous. We got to do more.
Our next speaker is Onesimus Stranch, followed by Marty Winkler. Onesimus, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm on the line. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can, and you may proceed.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for having me today. Thank you, Council, Mayor, City Manager Zerka, Chief Jerry Williams, and everyone in attendance. I greatly appreciate the efforts and the work y'all are doing to bring transparency to the Phoenix Police Department and to get this right. I've been around for quite some time, and as a citizen, I have been intimidated by the police department on various occasions and various stops. Some stops were really inappropriate. So I am glad that the city now is taking measures and steps to clean this up so that all citizens that live in, or residents that live in Phoenix, can feel safe as they navigate their way to and from work, activities, play, etc. Now, really truly what I'm interested in is giving Chief Jerry Williams the appropriate time to put the work behind, the effort behind the work that needs to be done to bring transparency and clean up this department. It's come to my attention that several members of the city council was going to put a demand to fire Chief Williams during this meeting. That would be an epic portion of mistake and continue to, especially with the escalation of crime that's going on in Phoenix. The department currently receives more than 2 million calls of service annually, and the increasing population will impact that rate, we know for sure. Chief Williams has made many strides to add more de-escalation and community building practices into the Phoenix Police Department and our communities, and it is my belief her departure will stall those efforts. Here's some of the successes that I know about that she has been a part of in recent years. She has Phoenix police officers document all unholstering of their gun and their actions and draw their weapons in less than 1% of the calls for the service. Also, 2,000 body-worn cameras have been deployed to officers. She's implemented can't-wait mandates, including bans of chokeholds. She's increased transparency and provide timely critical incident reports. Also has boosted staff and
Our next speaker is Marty Winkler, followed by Nadine Aluria. Marty, are you on the line?
I am. My name is Marty Winkler. Jerry Williams, Ed Zerker, all Phoenix police officers involved, Alistair Adele, and all MCAO staff involved must be fired with zero pensions. Fabricated and retaliatory charges are part and parcel of Phoenix police cover-up and corruption, are systemic and must stop. Like the protesters falsely and voraciously charged, I know all about Phoenix police manufacturing a false narrative, deception, bald-faced lies, and criminally charging innocent people in malice and retaliation. I was almost killed by Officer Jason Gillespie with his bare hands over calling the police for help, and sustained 4 fractures to the front and back of my skull, traumatic brain injury, and life-threatening disabling head and eye injuries. The city of Phoenix has engaged in criminal conspiracy, lies, and deception, and has fought my federal civil rights case, Martha Winkler versus City of Phoenix, for over 7 years. 2 years recently winning on appeal against the highest-powered, ruthless defense attorney, Kathleen Weineke Law, with unlimited taxpayer dollars, laughing as she defeats extreme police violence victims. They all did everything to cover up my horrific assault, and professional standards only interviewed Jason Gillespie 11 months later because they were forced to when they were trying to get my civil rights case dismissed by retaliatorily and maliciously prosecuting me for criminal trespassing, which I was found not guilty. Ballard Spear or anyone may contact me, Marty, M-A-R-T-I, Phoenix at AOL.com. Jerry Williams and Mayor Gallego, this is just the tip of the iceberg of the cover-ups and conspiracy of many other victims. You are keenly aware of my horrific assault by Jason Gillespie. He is an extreme threat and a menace to society and is now training new recruits at the academy. Regular public forums for Phoenix police violence must be held. Who do you call when the
Our next speaker is Nadine Aluria, followed by Luke Black. Nadine, are you on the line?
Yes, sir. Hello, I am.
Oh, and
Thank you,
may-
Mayor Gallego. Thank you. And City Council for hearing me today. I'm here as an active Phoenix native, Phoenix small business owner, PD supporter, and very active community member working to improve our great city. I will be honest that all of this is pretty difficult for most citizens to even keep up with as far as city council meetings and that sort of thing. I wrote my letter to you all here late last night about midnight. I hope you've all had a chance to each read it. I'm here in full support of our Phoenix PD and our chief, Jerry Williams. After working in a small business with employees my whole life and in 2 small family businesses, I fully understand the challenges in hiring and how extreme those challenges are now. In any large organization, business, or even family, there are always going to be a small percentage of bad actors who work to hurt the hard work and ethics of the group. That is just a fact in society. Please do not punish the whole police department for the actions of a few. I don't see a culture of discrimination with PD. I personally see our PD present whenever we ask them to be at any of our Sunny Slope events and meetings and answering our calls for service. I see this personally because I work actively with Phoenix PD on our Sunny Slope community endeavors and with the city of Phoenix. I'm completely against discrimination and I stand against it. My grandparents didn't even graduate from middle school, but they still learned to read, write, and fluently speak English, even though they were raised speaking 100% Spanish. This is all despite being very poor. My tata served in the Navy in World War II and thankfully came back, or I would not be here today. My grandparents never complained about discrimination or never worried their kids or grandkids about it. They are very hardworking and honest people, and they held their kids accountable and were the first to have all 5 of their children graduate from high school. Thank you so much for your time today. I am in full support of Phoenix PD and the sacrifice that they make every day. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Luke Black, followed by Bruce Franks. Luke, are you on the line?
Yeah, I'm on the line. All right, well, let's just cut straight to the point. You know, we have been sitting in these meetings year after year after year. We've sat here as you've been Mayor Kay Gallego. We've sat here with this chief of police for the last 5 years. And the reality is that this department is inherently violent and continues to be one of the most violent departments in this country. You have Nazis in this department. A training with the ADL and a period of reflection are inappropriate responses. This department is full of officers who fundamentally do not believe that they are under any obligation to respect the Constitution or people's human rights. This department is full of officers who believe they are above the law and who know that they can get away with anything they want because they know that you are not going to take action against them. This is your police department. Mayor Gallego, I continue to be disappointed in your leadership. You asked 0 questions on these egregious examples of police violence and First Amendment rights violation. What is that? We know that you don't intend to take any real steps to root out the white supremacy within this department. You know, we have the evidence against this department has been dragged out in front of you time and time and time again. But let's be real. Like, y'all aren't going to do anything about this. Your city manager is not committed to addressing these issues. Your chief of police oversees this department. She knew about the challenge coined 3 years ago. Do we need to remind you that this department has been its most violent under her leadership? Y'all have a responsibility to the people of this city to fire Ed Zerker and fire Jerry Williams.
Our next speaker is Bruce Franks, followed by Keena Harding. Bruce, are you on the line?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, let me say this. The Black leaders standing up for Jerry Williams do not speak for us who are directly impacted and on the ground doing the work. Deb Stark and O'Brien, please check your white privilege. Celebrating the police, but no compassion for what we face because of these heinous acts. And then you say don't generalize, but you all generalize a whole group of folks as gangs. Carlos, thank you for restating all of our demands that we've been telling y'all that you balked and pump faked on all of last year and earlier this year. But I'll help you out a little bit, and all of this is public information. Lynch, Pulliam, Sticker, and Toriano are a few of those officers that you were talking about who are part of True and on the Brady list that gave accounts of what happened during protests. Laura Pastor, It is a shame that three of you had to ask for an investigation rather than push for accountability when you knew this was happening. You didn't move or use your voice to bring light to these violent acts. You told me out of your own mouth, and I quote, "These charges wouldn't get dropped. I am a Phoenix native, and this is just how it goes." Shortly after we disagreed, you got to see Black directly impacted organizing work in real time as those charges started to get dropped. Yasmin, we told you this was an issue before you ever got elected. Black directly impacted orgs and organizers set the stage for you to be in solidarity with the movement, and you declined. Mayor Gallego, on January 25th, we met with Valerie Churchwell from your office as we were re-traumatized telling our stories. On February 12th, we provided reports, stories, discrepancies, all of that, so she can bring back to you. And what did we get? Nothing. Your junior varsity political organizing around damage control is actually insulting and disrespectful, and we don't need an expensive ass report or the DOJ to come in here and legitimize these things that Black and brown people have already proven to you. Our Black children get suspended from school longer for having natural hair in Texas than Jerry Williams got for violence in our community and allowing white supremacy to run rampant. It's time that her and all other officers and commanders involved are fired.
Our next speaker is Keena Harding, followed by Veridina Hernandez. Keena, are you on the line? Keena, are you on the line? Oh, Veridina, are you on the line?
I'm on the line. This is Viridiana Hernandez. This is disgusting to hear all these reports again, because all of you council members, Kay Gallego, and the mayor, everyone, all of you have been in these seats for years and have actively refused to do anything. You have heard these stories before. You have heard, Bruce is talking about it. You have heard them in your offices talking to you directly, and you have continued to ignore this and do nothing. This is such a disrespect. All of these recommendations or this, so-called discipline, that was not discipline. You all ruined lives. People were deported because this police department has a white supremacist agenda, because this department goes and actively celebrates hurting people that they're supposed to protect, people that pay their salaries. All of this is you all have actively ignored all of this since before 2017, but 2017 marking a moment where immediately after that protest, we went and we demanded answers, and you all showed up and on media said nothing had happened and people were not being hurt. And in 2019, when Jerry Williams was deposed, city attorneys were in that office. So I want to know, when did you all know? When did the city manager know? How early did y'all know and still didn't do anything? Because y'all have been knowing, even after these reports of these false charges, you all knew months ago and still have not done anything. This contract that was named as a barrier to police contract needs to be renegotiated. We want to know when these interviews were conducted and to in fact show that they were done after July 1st, because I don't believe that all of those interviews were. And I'm sure that some of those cops still refuse to participate. And we want to make sure, and we want to know what you're going to do about the damage and the trauma that was created because of these illegal actions that your racist department has done. So that's what I'm here to hear, is what the council's going to do. What are you all going to do about this? What policy changes are you all going to make?
Our next speaker is Leah Landrum Taylor, followed by Laurel Langmaid. Leah, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Thank you. And thank you to the council and the mayor for having this meeting here today. I do want to just say a few things, and that is, first and foremost, for decades, we know, yes, there have been issues, there have been concerns brought up going all the way back from Edward Mallett in my memory as a native here in this city. But what has clearly been a difference and a change, in my opinion, is the accessibility and having the chance to discuss these issues with our chief and to be able to work through them. Key example, the summer of 2019, we had listening sessions. And with these listening sessions, it was demographically diverse throughout the entire city of Phoenix. Individuals came forward night after night after night throughout the summer. But there were also two key individuals that were there, present, and accessible. And that was our Chief Williams and the city manager, Ed Zerker. The following areas that came out of those listening sessions were to have civilian review board, have comprehensive officer training, confrontational law enforcement activities, increased police community engagement, accountability, transparency, honesty, and respect. Obviously, there's still a lot more work to be done, but we want to make sure that it stays in the good hands of Chief Williams. It did not fall upon deaf ears. There have been a lot of things that have been currently implemented. This report was shared with the council and the mayor as well. And I would just like to see a special meeting to go over the volumes of information that was shared at that listening session. It's great stuff that's in there, but there are things that also will require council support as well to move forward. So again, my full support in continuing to work with Chief Williams. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Laurel Langmaid, followed by Joseph Larios. Laurel, are you on the line?
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for having us. I want to start out by saying that you need to keep the downtown operation unit and the tactical response unit. You need to support our police officers. Being a member of the Madison Pioneer Coalition neighborhood that's around 11th Avenue in Madison, we recognize the desperate need to have police officers there in our neighborhood on a 24/7 basis. What I hope goes forward is that the relationship and the trust between the city police and the city council, it needs repairing. There are a number of city council people that are on the council that are totally against the police, and it shows. Councilman DeCiccio and Councilwoman Stark, they get the relationship between the city council and the police. Discussing a coin that was done in 2017 and some other Trump paraphernalia, and it was eventually thrown in the trash, shows that somebody cared that this was not continuing. Councilman Garcia has continually said that he's against the police, and his stance on defunding the police is scary. And just think that he is vice mayor of the city of Phoenix is even more scary. The city council, that they don't have priorities for public safety. You look at what number one item on your agenda, and it's always liquor licenses. So that's priority over protection and safety. The public failure is at the city council level. You need to support the police. You allow guns to run rampant on our streets, and the police have to deal with that. So at the end of the day, I hope the city council takes an inward look at how they're supporting the police and the rhetoric that is coming out of these meetings. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Joseph Larios, followed by Marisol Leva. Joseph, are you on the line? Our next speaker is Marisol Leva, followed by AJ Marsden. Marisol, are you on the line?
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can.
Okay, I just want to start by saying how disrespectful it is to not include any of the directly impacted people. I should have started with, I am one of the 15 people who was charged as a member of the fictitious ACAB gang. And I've been sitting here listening to this meeting for almost 3 hours, and no one thought to include us in the conversation. I've reached out to the mayor's office. I've reached out to council members, and nobody wanted to give me an opportunity to speak. And it's disrespectful. You are talking about my life, the life of the protesters who I lost my job. We have had our mugshots plastered everywhere. I've been doxxed on antifawatch.net. This has ruined my life. And you're talking about policies and praising the police, worrying about their morale and their workload. What about my fucking life? Sorry, excuse me. But this is absolutely out of control. And the defense that Jerry Williams didn't know anything, how is that even a defense? Shouldn't you know what's going on in your department? She didn't know what was going on with anything, with the coin, with the gang charges. But then when she found out, she did nothing. How does she still have a job? She needs to be fired. Ed Zerker needs to be fired. Doug McBride needs to be fired. I'm blown away by the absolute lack of care that this council has shown for the past nearly a year. And now you guys want to pretend like you're sorry and this was such a terrible thing that happened? Absolutely not. We've been telling you, and we've been ignored. I've left messages, I've sent emails. It's bullshit, to be fair. And I don't know why we're sending this to Tucson. That's an insane thing. Why are we having more investigations? This is in black and white. They wrongfully arrested us. I was looking at 46 years in prison. I wouldn't have been released until I was 72. And you guys are talking about police morale? This is absolutely outrageous.
Our next speaker is AJ Marston, followed by Justin McKay. AJ, are you on the line?
Mayor?
Vice Mayor.
Yeah, may I ask a question of Marissa? Are you still on the line?
Please do.
Marissa, are you still on the line?
Yeah, I
am. Obviously, sorry isn't enough. But I'd like to, for you, if you're comfortable with it, to expand a little bit about the impacts on your life from what happened with these charges and what you've gone through. Just elaborate a little bit more on that.
Well, I worked in an ER, and Phoenix police reached out to Tempe police and got me fired. Like, they actually reached out on my behalf to get me fired. So I've been without an income. I can't get a job in my field that I was in. Other people who are arrested with me have had their homes surveilled. They've gotten pulled over like 5 times. It's taken a horrific toll on our mental health. I'm in therapy now, and this has just been an absolute disaster. And hearing the city attorney say that I should submit a request to have my records cleared is insane, because I didn't do anything wrong. And it's just so frustrating that we weren't even included in this conversation. And I've been sitting here listening to people talk about logistics and how this is going to look and how to go about this. But it's my life that you're talking about, and nobody even bothered to ask me how this has impacted me or what I want to see.
So you're saying these charges are on your record. Just if you can explain a little bit of how, because to someone that might be listening or watching the meeting, they might not understand how is it that it's impacting your life. Did these charges stick? Did you get convicted? What's happening?
I wasn't convicted. My charges were dropped with prejudice, but I no longer feel safe in the city of Phoenix. So I'm trying to move. And for apartments, they run a background check, and my stuff is still coming up. And I mean, it's not like people can't search my name. My mugshot comes up, and there's nothing I can do about that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and we'll try to figure out if we could be more helpful. And then I guess this question's to you, Chris. Like you mentioned earlier that folks can go and take this out. Is there anything we can do as a city with the responsibility that we obviously have to address this issue or proactively support people that were wrongfully charged, like Marissa?
Mayor, Councilman Garcia, we are reaching out to the county attorney's office to talk about them, and if there is any way we can assist, we will offer to do that. And if there's
I don't want to hear that. I want Jerry Williams to be fired.
If there is anything proactive we can do, we will ask the county attorney how we can help facilitate that to get those charges removed from their records.
Thank you, Chris.
Our next speaker is AJ Marston, followed by Justin McKay. AJ, are you on the line?
Yes, thank you. All of us at this meeting, we know about the Ballard Spar coin and the gang charges. Somber information for sure. I'm not opposing the items in the report. I'm opposed to demands for outlandish punishment and department changes. Demands made by some people and organizations who sweepingly said and still say vile and vulgar comments about our police department at council meetings and as they did during the protests. They make social media posts saying nasty things about council members and our city managers, including their own racially charged coin. I do appreciate that, decorum for the most part has been restored during our council meetings. And I do appreciate all that Chief Williams has enacted to further enhance the policing of our officers and public safety. Many of the new policies are based on what was clamored for the last 2 years, albeit not always politely. But I've never heard the protesters ask for partnership with the police and within the community. It's time that the people who are making the demands of the police step up and partner with the police to say what they will do to reduce crime, reduce calls for service, and build up the communities. D4, 5, 7, and 8 have the most crime. And I think that this partnership to reduce crime will help build the trust in the community. For the past 15 years, I've been partnering with the police and the community, working to reduce crime in D4 and other parts of Phoenix. I thank PPD for their work and sacrifice for public safety, and I hope to see more council support of our police. Please, let's all do what we can to make policing safer and our communities safer. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Justin McKay, followed by Helen Mesdebal. Justin, are you on the line? Our next speaker is Helen Mesdebal, followed by Lola Insengo. Helen, are you on the line? Helen, are you on the line?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I am. Can you hear me? Hi, Council. If Alistair Dowell, the Maricopa County Attorney, knew about the plan to charge protesters with fake gang charges, as we all know, why would anything ran by Chief Jerry Williams be any different? A few bad apples or officers that are on the Brady list that are suing your department, Chief Jerry. What are they trying to hide? In solidarity with directly impacted leadership, I'm going to repeat the demands that we've stated since November and place responsibility on Phoenix Police Department's violence in City Council's hands. If City Council wants to actually advocate for true justice and accountability, then you need to fire Ed, Jerry, and all the officers involved and pay reparations to all the people whose lives were ruined by these political prosecutions. We don't need any more ceremonial investigations. We need you to defund the Phoenix Police Department. I yield the rest of my time.
Our next speaker is Lola Insengo, followed by Angela Oli. Lola, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. It is so frustrating to be here again witnessing this clueless council go back and forth over evidence that's right in front of its face. The community has spoon-fed evidence to this council. Every single thing that you've seen on these reports, we have told you. We uncovered the evidence, we told you repeatedly, and all you did was call us names and ignore us, and you failed to act. We had to bring the media and submit citizens' petitions just to force you to move. You're only holding this meeting because the DOJ is here watching, and you don't want them to see how you've participated in these massive cover-ups, and that's why your city manager decided to retire, and that's why MCAO resigned too, a lot of those lead officials there. Chief Williams, a message to you. We are helping you by calling for your job. If you stay in this department, they're going to keep scapegoating you. You are a Black woman, I'm a Black woman, and I'm a fellow Black woman telling you that this is a sinking ship, and they're going to take you down with it. This council needs to use some common sense. It is appalling that we have to come here week after week, month after month, and explain these basic things to you. Wake up. You are being sued by hundreds of people and organizations. There is glaring evidence of misconduct, racism, and violence. And why are you struggling to comprehend this? Stop stalling and wasting money on more investigations and act already. It's been over a year that we've been telling you about this, and you've been in a holding pattern of indecision. Do you realize that so many protesters still don't even have their property back? This council failed to act in 2017 when your police shot that man in the groin, 2018 when you broke records for shooting people, 2019 when you investigated the challenge coin and found nothing, 2020 when your police brutalized our communities for exercising their First Amendment rights, and it's 2021. You are on the council now, and our community will not let you forget what you did or did not do. This will be your legacy. And Laura Pastor reminded you, many of us have been here for years. Listen to us. Don't listen to these randoms that are distracting you, who popped up today to lobby for Chief Williams. They aren't the people who will prevent you from being elected again. We are.
Our next speaker is Angela O'Lee, followed by Steve Odmondson. Angela, are you on the line? Angela, are you on the line?
And after Steve, we will break.
Angela? Nope. Okay. On to Steve. Steve, are you on the line? Steve, are you on the line? Michael Rogers? Oh,
Mayor, did you want to take a break? That was Steve, and he was not on the line.
All right. Yes, unless Michael Rogers is on the line, why don't we go ahead and take a 15-minute break? So let me just do one more sound check for, is Mr. Michael Rogers on the line?
Yes, I am on the line. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You are our grand finale before break. The floor is
I
yours.
appreciate that. I know it's only 2 minutes, but I'm going to do my best. I'm chairman of the Neighborhood Association, Papago Vista. I'm an active member of Phoenix Neighborhood Patrol, and I work directly on multiple days a week with my community action officer. I fully support Chief Williams and her excellent work in reforming the Phoenix Police. Accountability is what I want to get across here. Again, police accountability, I think we all support that. I get that. I'm not happy with what I'm hearing about these two incidences especially, but I do support the chief in her efforts to correct this. But I am also going to ask for accountability from the city council. Unless we employ wisdom, we can expect chaos. Accountability from my council. Understand that an influence in this discussion hurts us. An imbalance, I'm sorry, not an influence. There's an imbalance in this discussion. We've got a small number of radicals who support defund, dismantle, and destroy that are controlling the narrative. It's not accurate or helpful. The council is the biggest factor in police morale. Boots on the ground know that. Yet you create a climate that erodes public safety to the vast majority of your citizens. I see this, and I'll close with this. I see this as several Emperor Neros continuing to fiddle while Phoenix burns. We can address these points effectively. We can reform, but we can't sacrifice public safety, and that's what I'm seeing in my neighborhoods. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It is now 3 o'clock. The council will reconvene in 15 minutes.
i.e. the deployment of 2,000 body-worn cameras, documentation of unholstering, pointing a gun at people, the implementation of 8 kink mandates, and finally, ban chokeholds. I am a 41-year citizen of this community, residing in District 8, having served as a volunteer police advisory board chair under 4 previous police chiefs, who all were supported during critical incidents and matters in question, and the same would be expected for Chief Williams. I ask that Chief Williams be given the opportunity to follow through with the DOJ investigation to contribute her experience, expertise, and knowledge to all tiers necessary to bring this investigation to an accurate conclusion. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jeff Tissett, followed by Elizabeth Venable. Jeff, are you on the line? Jeff is not on the line. Elizabeth Venable is our next speaker. Elizabeth, are you on the line? Elizabeth is not on the line. Our next speaker is Kaliksha Vises. Kaliksha, are you on the line? Okay. Kaliksha is not on the line. Our next speaker is Nicholas Voss. Nicholas, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm on the line. I guess you can hear me, right?
Yes, we can.
Hello? Hi. Hey, I'm glad to find so many council members are out there who want to strengthen the First Amendment rights and transparency, so I'm going to give it a test of the genuineness. So I want to ask you to tread carefully about how you treat our beloved Chief Jerry Williams. Prior to the pandemic, I traveled to Santa Barbara on business, and on the way I stayed in Thousand Oaks, which is adjacent to Oxnard, where Chief Jerry was once chief there. And I bragged to the hotel concierge that we had stolen their top cop, and she replied that, yeah, we're not too happy about that. Then I stopped in Oxnard to refuel and pick up some snacks, and the Walmart clerk pretty much told me the same thing. Then when I got to Santa Barbara, I talked to the banquet setup manager at the Ritz-Carlton, and he said it was big news that Chief Jerry left Oxford for Phoenix. And so up and down the California coast, she's a celebrity. So we can't lose somebody like this, especially, let me remind you why we need her now more than ever. A year from now, we're going to be knee deep in planning for the Super Bowl 23, which we're not prepared for any longer with the shortage of police officers. We're in pretty big trouble. And so we have a serious problem that you need to be thinking about, council members, that we're not ready for the Super Bowl, and the NFL will remember this and never come back. And I want to know the council members who are widely known as anti-law enforcement, if they're going to appoint an unbiased, neutral committee members to this OAT committee. I'm afraid they're going to appoint people with ties to these radical leftist groups like Puente and Antifa, and someone who has nefarious intentions to destroy the police.
Our next speaker is Janelle Armstrong, followed by Dania Burns. Janelle, are you on the line? Oh, our next speaker is Dana Burns. Are you on the line? Dania Burns is not on the line. Our next speaker is Clovis Campbell. Are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Hello, and thank you for Mayor, City Council members, Mr. Zerker, and of course, Chief Williams for this opportunity to speak. A lot of people have already said a lot of the things that I had planned to say, so I'll be brief in my comments. For those of you who haven't been here long, I've been here now almost 60 years, and a lot of the complaints we're talking about, we're hearing about, center around trust and culture. And the culture has been here for a long time. culture where police officers feel like they can do what they want to do. Right now, we have a lot of great police officers, don't get me wrong, but there's still some out there who are the bad apples that make everyone else look bad. That culture should change and must change. With the opportunity to have over 1,000 new police officers hired soon, that gives us that chance to change the culture. And under leadership of Chief Jerry Williams, I think that we can do just that. Everyone has talked about the accolades, the things she's done in the community can make us improve. And I want to make sure that we keep her here. But at the same time, some of the younger people who got online talked about the abuse of what has happened to them. Well, hey, I've heard about that abuse for the last 45, 50 years. From the time that we saw Rodney King get beaten in 1991 to Ed Mallett, to Rudy Buchanan getting shot 89 times, including 10 times in the foot in 95, to all those other issues that come. Now we look at George Floyd. So some things are still happening here, and it's a culture. Phoenix is a great place to live. I've lived here all my life, and I appreciate everything that you all have done as council members and as leaders in our city to make sure that we continue to grow and be a model citizen and a model city. But we still have to address these issues of culture and trust. If we can trust someone to drive through a stoplight and other people to stop while you're driving through, we should be able to trust our police officers and what they're doing for us. So again,
Our next speaker is Jenny Clark, followed by Joel Copeland. Jenny, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. As a Phoenix native and mother of 5, I want to begin by stating the obvious. The Phoenix Police Department, under the leadership of Chief Williams, plays a critical role in our community by keeping our city safe for our families and businesses. Because we are the 5th largest city in the United States, we need a strong, well-funded, well-staffed police department so the city of Phoenix can flourish. In regard to the Ballard SPAR findings, I would agree that recommendations to develop new policies or strengthen existing policies are an action that makes sense for the department. It's reasonable for any city department to update its policies to ensure transparency when new situations arise. There is no better person to lead the City of Phoenix Police Department than Chief Williams. I hope the council will remember that Chief Williams, born and raised in Phoenix, who raised her family in Phoenix and still lives in and serves her community, has given more to this city in her 25 plus years with the Phoenix Police Department than those council members critiquing the department today combined. The City of Phoenix has done little to support our Phoenix police and Chief Williams under current leadership. In a statement by the mayor, she wrote, quote, "More needs to be done to restore confidence and have a successful Phoenix Police Department." I couldn't agree more. A successful police department is one that is supported by city leadership and, among other things, is well-funded and well-staffed. In conclusion, citizens of the City of Phoenix support and trust Chief Williams for many reasons, but also because in her 32-plus year in law enforcement, she has earned our trust. We know that she will continue to lead Phoenix in community policing, and we want a strong, well-funded, well-staffed, community-focused police department. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Joel Copeland, followed by Margaret Dietrich. Joel, are you on the line? Joel is not on the line. Margaret Dietrich, are you on the line? Margaret?
To be able to hear from, yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear? Okay. I'm glad we've had these investigations and this open discussion and to be able to hear from these residents on both sides. I support the police and Chief Williams since I have worked with so many great officers. It's very important to not to root out or retrain officers who have personal problems with various groups of people. So thank you, Chief Williams, and I hope we continue to move in that direction. Thanks. That's it.
Our next speaker is Angela Ogile. Angela, are you on the line? Angela? Oh, if it's possible, could you turn up your audio? We can barely hear you. Our next speaker is Annie Ender. Annie, are you on the line? Annie, are you on the line? Oh, Annie, are you on the line?
Hello, yes.
Yes. Oh, perfect.
I'm sorry if that turned that up. Thank you. This is Ann Ender. I'm the president of Operation Blue Ribbon and a neighborhood leader. And I have complete faith that Chief Jerry Williams and the city manager's office are committed to resolving the issues discussed, as well as continuing to improve the Phoenix Police Department. As a neighborhood leader and now president of Operation Blue Ribbon, one thing remains consistent: community plus the Phoenix Police Department equal public safety. The process is always the same. Neighborhood leaders work with neighbors that are directly impacted by ongoing issues of nuisance, blight, and crime. Crime, particularly serious crime, does not come into a neighborhood overnight. So I took a look at the statistics from the Uniform Crime Reporting, and as it turns out, I looked primarily at the violent and property crimes. That District 8 has the highest incident of crime, followed by District 4 and District 5. And to coin a phrase of the vice mayors, what I find most concerning are the number of homicides in D5 and 8. Possibly given your concerns about public safety, it is possible that it's time to shift your focus to your districts. Councilwoman Guardado can speak to the importance and the success of collaboration of neighborhood leaders and PD in several sections of her district. We would be pleased to work with any of you. You can find us pretty simply. I just want to end by saying, this is to you, Chief Williams. It's an honor to work with you and the Phoenix Police Department to make our community safer. So I'm grateful for your leadership. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Chelsea Friday, followed by Cynthia Garcia. Chelsea, are you on the line? Chelsea, are you on the line? Chelsea's not on the line. Cynthia Garcia. Cynthia, are you on the line? Cynthia is not on the line. Julie Gunnagle. Julie, are you on the line? Julie? Oh, Julie's not on the line. Oh, Dana Burns, are you on the line?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you very much. You skipped me earlier. But anyway, I want to thank you all for allowing me to speak quickly. But I want to address the issue of you talking about being falsely accused and things by City of Phoenix PD or whatever. That's me 15 years ago, but I've been vindicated. Nobody said anything about that. I used to be an employee of the great city of Phoenix. And when I was laying in that jail at Australia Jail, I received a visit from a Miss Janelle Woods. I didn't know who she was at the time, but she told me that Commander Jerry Williams sent her to visit me. Now, this is where human life comes into play. And 15 years ago, Chief Jerry Williams, your words are still cemented in my heart. When I sat across that table, handcuffed to a table for something that I was wrongly accused of doing and vindicated later, Chief Williams told Ms. Janelle Woods to tell me that she's praying for me. Well, she was commander back then. She's praying for me and that everything will be all right. I went through what I went through 15 years ago today to tell Miss Jerry Williams that everything is going to be all right, sister. Yeah, the same words that you cemented in my heart, I want to give it to you too, because you're doing a wonderful job. You don't have any control over those who are doing what they're doing, just like the rest of you leaders have no control over what everybody in your department is doing. If that's the case, every one of y'all needs to be on the hot seat today. And it took a white man to go to the street transportation department to get what I wanted for the South Phoenix community. It didn't take this little black girl voice, but I thank God for those who he's putting in my life to make sure my voice is heard. So for my time is up, Chief.
Our next speaker is Amy Megalo, followed by Samuel Merton. Amy, are you on the line?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. It's a little echoey.
Okay, and also though, Juanel Williams is here and he's ready to speak, and he was talking when you guys called him. Juanel Armstrong, am I able to give him the phone?
You need to speak.
Okay,
Amy,
well,
this is your time.
Okay. All right. So I'm Amy Meglio. I'm with the We Rising Committee, and I'm a member of the No Cap Coalition. So I just want to make it clear, and recorder, please hear me because you have misrepresented what we've said in the past on public record. Please hear me when I state that no policy or policy review can fix this institutional white supremacy. There should be no gang protocol because this very event that's happening is proof that gang protocol is used to oppress Black and brown folks and people who stand up for Black and brown folks. That's something that cannot be fixed with simple policy changes. Everybody needs to be fired, and I need you all to know today, and if the DOJ is listening, I'm not going to send this info to you, but if you're listening, take a note, because this problem is deep-rooted all the way into this city council room. They not only ignored last year, I showed up to multiple meetings. I sent the mayor and everybody a list of all the officers that were awarded by the city in 2019. Over half of those officers, with just off of public record, without asking for personnel files, have done things like Officer Kyle Frick, number 7937, twice has murdered a suspect of mistaken identity, and one of the times it was a teen, and both times they were brown. Over half the officers, I sent them sourced articles with links, and every single one of the people in this room ignored me. So make it very clear that no solution is sitting in this council room either, because it's not just me, but I can forward the email showing that I followed up and your officers ignored me. And when you Google my speech that I have recording of online, it says, Ms. Meglio was concerned that city council awarded officers who have used force. No, officers who have twice killed.
Our next speaker is Samuel Merton, followed by Annalise Ortiz. Samuel, are you on the line?
Yes. So I'd like to start by saying Sal DeCicio's comment, I think, shows that he doesn't have any interest in hearing Phoenix communities and his constituents. I really question why he is a council member. But anyway, I don't understand why there's reorganizing of these officers and keeping them in the department. Some council members dance around this, but everyone involved clearly needs to be fired. These gang charges and protest arrests ruined people's lives. People got deported after protesting. People got fired from their jobs. People lost their property or had it stolen by the police department. It is shameful to keep these officers and officials in the department when there's absolutely zero trust in the city right now. This has been going on for years and decades for some people, and it's just that right now there's an investigation to prove all of it. When it comes to the challenge coin, it's clear that Phoenix Police Department is okay with white supremacist ideals, and it will be known that the city welcomes those ideals as well, and lets every officer that created the gang, the fake gang, is fired without their pension, Every officer involved in the challenge coin was fired without their pension. Chief Jerry Williams knew about the challenge coin at least since 2017. So having every felony charge go through the chief doesn't seem like accountability since she ignored the coin and those issues for years. You need to fire all the officials involved in the Ballard Spar investigation, the October 17th arrest, and the challenge coin. This includes Chief Jerry Williams and Chief Connolly. You need to implicate both plea and the MCAO as complicit entities. It means nothing that there's assessments being made or policy changes being considered if you keep liars and white supremacists.
Our next speaker is Annalise Ortiz, followed by Jacob Rayford. Annalise, are you on the line?
I am. My name is Annalise Ortiz. I'm a Phoenix resident and I advocate in my community, particularly as it relates to violations of civil rights. The seriousness of the Phoenix Police Department's abuse of power cannot be addressed by putting weak policies in place or shuffling officers. I work with people in my community who've been impacted by the criminal legal system, and I've seen how devastating the consequences of an arrest can be, even when the charges are later dismissed or convictions are overturned. The experience of being arrested impacts people's emotional, financial, and physical well-being and can put people at risk of deportation. Indeed, as folks shared earlier, those are the exact consequences that these 39 protesters who were falsely charged faced because of the injustices of the Phoenix Police Department and the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. Arrests can also serve as an overwhelming barrier to finding housing, employment, and even educational opportunities. Along with the harm caused directly to protesters, this was an orchestrated attack on the rights of every Phoenix resident to exercise free speech and assembly. I do believe the law enforcement agencies involved intended to chill free speech and discourage us from criticizing police brutality or other political issues that they don't agree with. But as long as people are being killed at the hands of Phoenix police, we will have people organizing to call for an end to this grave injustice, and rightfully so. The Phoenix Police Department and the Maricopa County Attorney's Office caused severe harm to the lives of the 39 people falsely arrested and charged, and thus severe consequences should be in order for all officers involved. I urge you to listen to the demands from directly impacted leadership and Black-led organizations in the community, including the demands for terminations. There must be reparations paid to the people whose lives were devastated by these political prosecutions. And as a taxpayer, I do not want to see more of my money spent on investigations that tell us what we already know. You have the answer. The next step is accountability.
Our next speaker is Jacob Rayford, followed by Jenny Rita. Jacob, are you on the line?
Y'all can hear me? All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, here we go. Okay, so as you know, my name is Jacob Rayford. I'm from We Rising. So the council needs to vote in favor of giving the innocent protesters reparations. Like, that's how I want to start this. Y'all need to do what's necessary. Furthermore, attempting to cut off Marissa 2 minutes, 2 minutes after 2 minutes flat when she was giving a direct account on how those actions impacted her and others' lives is grotesque, and it underscores how performative today's meeting is. So we told y'all for over a year, about a year at this point, that the Phoenix Police Department was predatorily and unjustifiably arresting us and setting a path for the Maricopa County Attorney's Office to attempt to destroy lives of innocent people through fabricated felonies. That's collusion. See, since we were actively educating people on not voting for the incumbent and MCAO head Alistair Adele, the targeting around these things is definitively political prosecution, and there's myriad other things that connected to what we would define as that. So despite substantial evidence provided by this community, provided by the media, legal aid, this council nor the Department of Justice saw it fit to at the very least implicate the MCAO in all this. So especially when kids are being hit with fabricated gang charges, like what else do you need? You all need to implicate the unions that support this, like plea, this unilateral hidden and approved police contracts enable this sort of behavior. I watched friends go through debilitating mental and financial hardship over these actions for months, all for standing in the street and exercising their amendment. Some of us even attempted to speak with the city, only to be patronized and insulted by people like Assistant Chief Conley, who the city, High Valerie, attempted to shoehorn into these online meetings. Y'all knew, okay? So Jerry Williams used duplicity to trick amateur organizers into believing that she would stand up to the system and then play them and sat back as her police department continued to kill innocent people and aggressively suppress peaceful protests. Then sat before us months ago and lied about the history of the 2020 protests. And who knows if that fueled the Maricopa County Attorney's Office incentive to charge people as felons. She needs to be fired. The assistant chiefs need to be fired, not demoted. They knew. And Zerker, you have been the point of failure for
Our next speaker is Jenny Rita, followed by Michael Kelly. Jenny, are you on the line? Jenny is not on the line. Our next speaker is Michael Kelly. Michael, are you on the line? Michael Kelly's not on the line. Mayor, that is the end of the speakers.
Wonderful. Thank you all for participating and providing valuable input. Do we have any council member final comments? With that, we are adjourned. We will continue to work on these important issues and work to build the best, safest city possible. Thank you. Have a good evening.
By March, air raids to Berlin are taking place by as many as 1,400 bombers and fighters with drop tanks.